A Thursday edition of the Sports Bash starts right now. What's going on, everybody? This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning producing today's show. You out there. Wet day. Phillies postponed. Probably a good thing. We have a ton of stuff that we want to dive into today. Very busy show. 609-403-0973. Get that text board fired up. If you're watching the show live video at 973ESPN.com, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Get involved in the live chat. How's my day, Jeff? My day is going well. Thank you for asking. How was yours? You know, I said yesterday that Joel Embiid had to dominate the game last night. There was only one thing that I really wanted to see from that game last night, and that is Joel Embiid just absolutely impose his will and demoralize the Brooklyn Nets. I think the Brooklyn Nets got demoralized by Joel Embiid. However, did the Brooklyn Nets late in that game, they made a late push, and I'm not going to take too much from it. We talked about it yesterday that the 76ers needed to just get the win. Doesn't matter how they got the win. And for the most part, they kind of dominated that game. I would say, you know, the Sixers kind of put it in cruise control down the stretch. They kind of like down the stretch of that game, they put it into cruise control. But, you know, then they had to ask the starters to kind of come back into the game. And I think the starters kind of already had their feet up, and, you know, a 22-point lead got whittled down, and it became a game late in that game. But I'm not all that worried about the fact that the Sixers, you know, they didn't blow them out. I saw people, well, what are they going to do when they have a full team? The game's going to be different. That's what's going to happen. The game would be a different game. That's what would happen if the Sixers played the Nets and the Nets had a full brigade. It would be a different game. I mean, the Sixers were pretty much up handily all game long. They took the starters out. The bench was in. I give Brooklyn credit. They didn't go away. They kept on kind of fighting. And for the most part, I thought the Sixers were pretty dominant. It's what we said yesterday. They had no answer for Joel Embiid last night. And keep in mind, as Clark Burns brings up on Facebook, Clark, very smart. No Hill, no Howard for the Sixers either. If Dwight Howard's there last night, they had no big, one of the problems that Brooklyn has is they don't have a big. Well, when Embiid went out late in that game, the Sixers didn't really have they were playing Mike Scott at center. I mean, it's like people want to overanalyze stuff. Well, what are the Nets going to do when they have a full brigade of players? The game's going to be different. I mean, the Sixers were missing two guys, not as impactful as their two, but different. I thought the one thing I asked yesterday was Joel Embiid has to dominate the game. I told you, bet the over. It was 30.5. I bet it last night. It was easy money. I think he had 30 at halftime last night, something like that. I continue to ask this question. Who can defend Joel Embiid in the Eastern Conference? No one on Brooklyn. LaMarcus Aldridge, by the way, retired today. And it's, you know, it's a shame because he had a heart situation. I think he had an irregular heartbeat, so he decided, you know, he didn't want to risk it. So LaMarcus Aldridge is retired. I don't think LaMarcus Aldridge would have helped them out. I think Joel Embiid would have pretty much abused him. But that's one less big man to foul. That's one less big man to bang on Joel Embiid. The Nets simply do not have an answer for Joel Embiid. Now, late in that game, they started to really double him hard. They had Claxton, who's an athletic big, and they sent guards at him. And I think keep in mind, I think Embiid was kind of relegated to the fact that his night was over, and then they had to call him back out there. I'm not, you know, they need to be better. That double gave them some problems late in that game. There's no question about it. The double gave them some problems late in that game. Joel needed to be a little better. I think he was. But that being said, what we said yesterday played true. They have nobody that can defend Joel Embiid. Nobody. And if Tobias Harris plays the game he had last night, they're in trouble. Most teams are in trouble. Now, if Kevin Durant has a 35-point game in him and James Harden has a 35-point game in him, that's a different story. The Sixers situation, though, is, hey, we think we can defend you and keep you out of the 30s. We think we can defend you and keep you out of 28, 25. That's why this battle is going to be so interesting. 609-403-0973, text board thoughts on the game last night. Harris is watching on YouTube. Mike, do you think Doc will win Coach of the Year? Also, do you think George Hill could play if they needed him, but they don't as of now, so they're resting him to the playoffs? All right, do I think Doc will win Coach of the Year? No, I don't. And I think he should be in the conversation. No questions about it. I think Coach of the Year conversation has got to be Quinn Snyder. It's got to be Monty Williams. Those two teams, Utah and Phoenix. I mean, Phoenix hasn't been to the playoffs in a long time. I mean, Steve Nash played there the last time I think they made the playoffs. Might have been a little bit more recent than that. But they have been a terrible franchise. So I would think the former Sixer assistant, he would be at the top of the list, I'm imagining. I guess you could throw Quinn Snyder, Utah in there. They're the number one seed. They're the best team in the West, best team in the league right now, record-wise. So I would think he would be in that mix as well. I think Doc might be third, fourth, somewhere in the list. I'd have to think if I'm missing a guy that those two stand out to me the most. But Doc definitely is in the conversation. He should be anyway. I think the other guy, I mean, I know it's only been a half a season, not even, but McMillan, what he's done with Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta's now 5 games over 500. They're 7 out of 10, 3 in a row. They've really taken off. Now, he's not going to win it for coaching half a season, but Nate McMillan's done a great job with that Hawks team. I think you can put Tom Thibodeau in that mix. I mean, the Knicks have won 4 in a row. I mean, this is a horrible franchise for the last 20 years, and they're probably going to make the playoffs for the first time. My gosh, and I can't even remember the last time the Knicks were in the playoffs. It's got to be in the aughts, right? I mean, they haven't made it in the teens, have they? I mean, did they make it once back there with Melo? 1 year. So the Knicks have been terrible. So Thibodeau could be in that mix. I guess one other guy you could probably put in the mix for Coach of the Year. I would say Quinn Snyder, Monty Williams, maybe Thibodeau. Maybe they're the guys to me, and then Doc. So I think Doc's probably the third guy right now. And Philly, look, they were the 6th seed last year, and you could say the same thing. They're the 1 seed now. That's a big difference. But the Sixers are considerably better than they were last year. But I think those other two guys are probably there. Good question, Harris. Your other question is, do I think George Hill could play if they needed him to? No. I think he's close. I think it's, well, yes and no. I think he could play. I think the reason is they don't want him to get hurt. They don't want him to hurt, something else, meaning they don't want him to injure his Achilles or his hamstring or his groin. I don't think he's ready to that capacity. I think the thumb might be ready to go. So I think George Hill will probably play by the last week of April here. I think you'll see George probably, I would imagine, one of those games against, well, they do play Oklahoma City on Monday. Maybe he wants to face his former team. I don't know. They play Milwaukee twice. That's a former team of his, too. So I would say either the Saturday Milwaukee game, the Monday Oklahoma City game, and they got 2 games against Atlanta coming up the last week of April. I would imagine one of those games is where you'll see George Hill for the first time. Jeff likes my Nike shirt. Oh, thank you, Jeff. It's actually not a shirt. It is a windbreaker. I actually have another Nike shirt on underneath, but am I not supposed to say that? Some people don't want to buy Nike stuff, right? Am I not supposed to say that I have a Nike stuff on? This was given to me. I didn't actually buy it myself, but it's a nice West Virginia windbreaker. I like it. Thank you, Jeff. James is watching on Facebook. He says there is no one player in the NBA that can guard Joel Embiid. No, there's not many, if any. Knicks, by the way, have made the postseason 5 times since 2000. Carmelo Anthony did it in 10, 11, and they did it again in 11, 12, and then again in 12 and 13. So they had a little 3-year run there, but that was way long ago. The only player who Joel has had some problems with has been Gasol when he was in Toronto. He did give Joel some problems there. Other than that, I mean, Joel this year has been, and I talked about it yesterday. I mean, somebody said, well, I want to see him do it against the better teams. Well, they played the Nets last night. I get it. The Nets were shorthanded. But as I tried to explain, the Nets don't have anybody. They might be the best team in the league. They don't have anybody to stop Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid can score 35 against them every single game. They have nobody to stop him. No, nobody. They have absolutely nobody to defend Joel Embiid. No surprise there. 609-403-0973. Mike, how do you feel about them keeping Kyrie out when the Nets came back with essentially their bench? Was kind of surprised. Could have been a different outcome, and they half-assed confidence crusher considering Joel had to come back. I wasn't sure if Kyrie was on minutes restrictions. I think it was just one of those things where the bench got them back in the game. Sometimes, the coach will see, hey, this unit is got it tonight. They got a little something going. Let's just stick with them. I mean, Kyrie had a big game scoring-wise. I don't know if he was on a minute restriction. And I wouldn't say that it was a half-ass confidence crusher. Going into the game, when they decided not to play anybody, I think we kind of realized that the Nets don't care about being the 1 seed. The Sixers do. They said it afterwards. We're young. We want that 1 seed. So that is definitely something that the Sixers, they have a little circle around. We want the 1 seed. Doc talked about it last night. They commented on it after the game, and he was not bashful about saying that we value that 1 seed. But what did we really learn from last night's game? We'll talk to Keith Smith at 3:20 for today's Inside the Sixers. Also, we'll talk NBA. Mitch Lawrence's take on this, the national basketball radio host from NBA radio on Sirius XM satellite radio. Joel Embiid said last night, and I like this, we could do much better. I wasn't at my best. I missed so many easy buckets. I'm focused on my team and winning the whole thing. He says, I just feel that we could do better. And I like that. Hey, we're happy we won the game. I scored whatever he had, 36, 38, whatever it was last night. I can do better. And Joel said it after the game. Playing at home gives us a huge advantage. For me, the number 1 seed is very important for that reason. Every game we play at home, it feels like we're unbeatable. And then Embiid actually said last night, if you caught this, talking about that comment about, the confidence and all that kind of stuff, which was, he said, I felt I sat too long into the fourth quarter. We just didn't have the same physicality that we had for the first 3 quarters. Yeah, and I think they were up 22, and you had Doc Rivers trying to just run it out with the bench. But what I want you guys, if you're watching the show on the stream, is Embiid on the Shaq level, Bob Hyson. He's on the Shaq level, yeah. Different player than Shaq, way more offensively gifted than Shaq was. I mean, Shaq was just a powerful dunker in an era that didn't have anybody to defend him. I mean, Shaq was a man-child, and there was nobody physically as gifted as him. Shaq didn't have any offensive skill set for the most part. I mean, he just backed your ass down, but he played in an era where backing you down was the norm. Like, if Shaq was playing in today's game, he'd have a rough go at it. I mean, I'm saying a rough go. He could still score down on the block, but there's the physicality. He had no outside game to speak of. Zero. And that's why I think people get, they look at Joel as like a Shaq-type figure, and they just want him to be this back to the basket. And yes, Paul, Embiid can make free throws. That's a big difference. Shaq was not a great free throw shooter. Embiid hits about 90% of his free throws, which is unbelievable for a man of that size. So, yeah, Bob, Embiid is on the Shaq level. Embiid's a more talented player than Shaq, though. That's not a knock on Shaq. Shaq played in a different era. That's an interesting topic, though. Who would you rather have, Shaq or Embiid? I mean, Shaq for that era was almost unstoppable because the game was all inside. It was all in the paint. And Embiid plays in an era where everything's outside the three-point line. It's a good point there, Bob. I like that conversation. 609-403-0973. Mike, I don't understand why the so-called experts are crowning the Nets. Embiid is a monster. I feel he'll be even better in the playoffs. Well, they're crowning the Nets because they have 2 former MVPs and 2 champions. Kyrie Irving, who did not win an MVP, has won an NBA title. He did it with LeBron. And James Harden has won an MVP, and Kevin Durant. So that's why the NBA is all about stars. They have 3 of them. And they have 3 of the best. I mean, Kyrie, I think, is the best number 2 guy in the league. Right? He's probably the best number 2 guy in the league. And then James Harden would be... See, I don't think Harden's the best player on the team that wins a championship, so he would be in the number 2 category now, which would make Kyrie a 3, which means Kyrie's by far the best number 3 guy in the league, and James Harden's by far the best number 2 guy in the league. We always said, hey, if James Harden could be your second guy, you're going to be tough to beat. If James Harden's your best guy, we saw that. He didn't have, I think he's like the best of the next group, like Dame Lillard, Devin Booker, like all those guys. They're awesome players. Harden is the best of the second group of guys. There's the 5 guys that I've mentioned that can win the title because they're the best player on the team. Mike, it would be interesting with Shaq in today's game. Well, we talk about this a lot. Like, Karl Malone is one of the greatest scorers in the history of the game. I think he's number 2 all time. Or did he take over? Is he number 1 now? No, number 1 now. Karl Malone, I think, was number 2, right? Yeah, like he's still scoring. Like Karl Malone's still out there hitting elbow jumpers. He finished number 2. I didn't know if he was number 2 now, meaning that LeBron passed him. I think LeBron is 3 and Karl Malone is 2. Kareem is 1. Malone is 2. Yeah, all right. Karl Malone is the second greatest scorer in the history of the game. But does his game translate to today's game? I don't know. Do you want a guy like nobody wants a guy just shooting elbow jumpers, even if you're the greatest of all time at it? A 6-foot Karl Malone is essentially built like LeBron James. It's what he is. They almost had the same exact physical build. But back then, Karl Malone shot elbow jumpers. And by the way, LeBron shoots a lot of elbow jumpers too. I mean, his game is just all over the place. But I don't know, like the Shaqs and the Karl Malones, the big man of the 90s, early 2000s, that big man's in a different world today. All right, 609-403-0973. Text board, get it rocking and rolling. Let's have the fun today. Let me ask you guys, what did we learn, if anything, from that game last night? We all waited. We were excited from it. But what did we really learn? We learned this. The Sixers are in first place now. But did you take anything else? The one thing I took from that game, the Nets uniforms were horrible. They were bad AAU uniforms. Terrible. They should be embarrassed, the Nets, with those uniforms. Go back to those 90 tie-dye looking ones. Sports Bash Live. 90. I always like the uniform stuff. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Download the free app. Get it on your phone. You can watch the show live. Download that app. You'll see the link to watch the show live. Just click on that. You can watch us through YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And by the way, thank you for all the people who have been watching the show. We had monster streaming numbers since the show has gone video. I mean, unbelievable. I couldn't believe when I looked at how many people have been watching this show. So thank you to all the people who have been watching and commenting. But all I ask you to do is share the show. If you're on Facebook, hit the share button, hit the like button. If you're on YouTube, get it out there. If you're watching on Twitter, the more the merrier. The more people that are commenting and engaging and chatting, the more fun we have. And I enjoy doing it with you guys each and every day here on the Sports Bash. On the radio, of course, which is my favorite thing to do. Love the radio portion. And the video, of course, for all the people that are watching involved on the radio and the video. All right, let's get this show going. Sports Bash brought to you by Matt Blatt Kia. They want to get you approved today. Matt Blatt, 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. I'm Mike Gill, at Mike Gill Show on Twitter, 609-403-0973. Something you learned from the game last night. Next. And don't forget, I got a Sports Bash Cash code word for you. You can win $1,000 today on the show, up to $10,000. The more words you enter, the more words you can win. Got words at 55 after the hour from now until 6:55 tonight. They start tomorrow morning at 9:55 during KJZ. I have a Sports Bash Cash code word for you. You enter the word, you win $1,000, up to $10,000. It's brought to you by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union. So, did we really learn anything from the Sixers win over the Nets? Give me your thoughts in the chat. Text 609-403-0973. Call 609-573-ESPN, 609-573-3776 if you want to get in on the phones. I'll open the phone lines for this hour if you want to get involved. Jason Fitz next hour, Keith Smith next hour. Busy show today, but if you want to hop on the horn, you could do so, 609-403-0973. Jason is watching on Facebook. Says, I learned defensively the Sixers can play with anyone at full roster. I don't disagree. I would say, James, I don't know that I learned that from the game last night, though. I didn't think they played great defensively last night. Doc actually talked about that in the little between quarter interviews. He said, we are scoring the basketball. We've got 96 points, but they've got 84. And they were missing two of their guns. So I agree with what you're saying. I just didn't learn that from the game last night. I've learned that over the course of the year that I think they can play with anybody full roster. I don't know that I learned that from the game last night. Paul is watching on Facebook. He says, I learned that the NBA better do something when they negotiate the next contract with the players union. I can't imagine the NBA loves their stars resting on nights with that kind of marquee matchup. No, I can't imagine they like it either. It's a problem. I don't know how they fix it. I think they've tried to do like, hey, if we're playing, you got to figure out a way to get these guys out there. We want you to rest on other nights. It's a bad product. Last night was a shame. You had the two number one teams. I talked about it yesterday. You had the two number one, the one and the two. They were tied for first yesterday. And you had that game on national TV. You had Durant play against the Timberwolves the night before instead of playing against the Sixers. I don't know how they fix that. These teams, Steve Nash talked about it after the game. They have prioritized health more than winning. They're telling you the regular season doesn't matter. They're telling you, hey, the Milwaukee Bucks were the number one seed a couple of times, and it didn't do anything for them, so why should we go full throttle for a full season? Right? That's the problem. I would say, look, teams have done it in the past, but people say, who cares? That's the past. Michael Jordan never sat out. They did okay. LeBron James doesn't sit out. They do okay. Kobe Bryant didn't say, yeah, you know what? I need a rest tonight. They did okay. I feel like we're always so worried about the guys, like somebody getting hurt. We live in this, like the mentality of, I don't want guys to get hurt. I think by trying to not get them hurt is more of a possibility of them getting hurt because they're not playing. These guys are in tremendous shape. I mean, come on. They're in way better shape than these guys were back in the 90s, and those guys played every night. It's a weird dynamic, Paul. I don't know how they fix it. Jeff Bone and Pookie, what's up, man? Watching on YouTube. Jalen, super teams is an illusion. I think he's referring to someone else in the chat. Super teams is an illusion that the media puts out where there's three big names on the same team. There's no really super teams. All teams in the NBA have players capable of being stars. I don't agree with that at all. No, not every team has three players capable of being stars. That's why they stink. That's why, like Jahlil Okafor, when he's on the Sixers, averages 15, 16, whatever it was, his rookie year, because somebody has to score. You put him on a team, he's not useful. Michael Carter-Williams was the rookie of the year. Why? Because they didn't have anybody else. Someone had to score those points. But he's not capable of being a star, even though he was capable of being the rookie of the year. No, Jeff, you got to have three big names. You don't have to. You can have two or three, but that's why the illusion is not an illusion. they're super teams because they have superstars. That team has 3. I mean, superstars is an interesting word. I would say there's only like 5 superstars. The rest of these guys are all-stars, but then there's all-stars, and then there's high-level all-stars. There's perennial all-stars, and then there's like the Andre Iguodala level all-star who makes it. Al Horford makes it one year. He makes it one other year, but he's not a perennial all-star. What do you got?
Every team in the NBA at this point has to have a guy who, if you placed him on any team, he makes them a contender. You need at least one of those guys to win an NBA championship. If you don't have one of those guys, there's only one team in the last 30 years that has won a championship without it, and that was the outlier. That is not the commonality. So one team in 30 years has done it without a transcendent superstar. We're not talking about Bradley Beal.
And by the way, Detroit had
a bunch of all-stars.
Four guys that were all-stars.
They had a defensive player of the year in Ben Wallace. They had an all-star in Rasheed Wallace. They had an all-star in Chauncey Billups, who was a 3rd overall pick. They had an all-star in Rip Hamilton. And they had a very good defensive player in Tayshaun Prince. And those guys were perfectly built to beat an aging Lakers roster. And they went 7 games with the Spurs the next year. So that was a once-in-a-lifetime type of team because of the way they played and who their coach was.
That's it.
Larry Brown.
And that, by the way,
aside from that team, every team has to have a top-of-the-tier superstar. Not an all-star, a superstar.
Yeah, and that happened almost 20 years ago now. No one has replicated the Pistons model.
No, not just 20 years. It's once in 30 years.
Right. I'm saying I'm saying people keep bringing that team up. That was almost 20 years ago. And in the 20 years since, no one had, because I don't want to talk about before. I'm saying that team happened.
Right.
No one has said, let me replicate that team.
And there's a reason why.
Because it's impossible to do.
It's not replicable. It's a once-in-a-lifetime situation. So if you're trying to win an NBA title at some point in your franchise's history, you have to have elite talent, not just good talent.
Let me talk to Rodney in Mays Landing. He's on 97.3. What's up, Rodney?
Hey, what's up, man? I wanted to comment on the Joel Embiid thing, on who can stop him.
If you could find them, let me know.
What about the combination of Anthony Davis, and Andre Drummond?
Oh, well, Andre Drummond, Embiid has served him his lunch over and over again. So if it's one-on-one with Drummond and Embiid, I mean, and that's a matchup that Embiid has kind of dominated. Anthony Davis, I don't know that he's really, I mean, that would be interesting. He's a more athletic player, but I think Embiid would probably muscle him around, though. When the Sixers play the Lakers, Embiid has feasted on him. I mean, he scored like 39. I think he scored like 40 against him when they played.
Yeah, but in the playoffs is different.
It is. No, and that's a different.
That would be for the championship.
Right. That would be. And look, yeah, you're talking about a final situation. And the question, which is fair, but in the Eastern Conference, there's not a guy in the East that's on a decent team.
Oh, I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, and like Drummond, I mean, he has hammered Drummond and Davis. I mean, the games that I'm remembering that he's played against the Lakers. Now, I don't know that Davis played in the game this year. I think he was hurt, but last year Embiid had like 40 against him. Davis doesn't want to defend centers. That's the thing. He's not a guy who wants to defend, a big-time center. Now, I know Embiid's not a back-to-the-basket all the time, but when he wants to muscle his way into the paint, Anthony Davis is going to have a tough day at the office there. Don't you agree?
Yeah, but I think he has the quickness to stick with Embiid.
He does.
And the defensiveness to stick with Embiid.
Oh, I think what's going to be interesting, Rodney.
Can we stop him? I don't think he can stop him. I think the thing that he could probably do is slow him down more than anybody else in the league.
Well, and I think, and I appreciate the call, Rodney, is that Anthony Davis can be the length and then they send someone else at him. That could give him problems. That's where teams are going to have to do against him. Because if you're going to one-on-one him, no one can stop him. Nobody. But what they can do is, like last night, Claxton has got length and athleticism. And he's bodying Embiid up. And then that guard comes over really quick, and then the two of them are all over Embiid. And then because of the length that Claxton had, Embiid couldn't get a passing lane. Now, this was late in the fourth quarter. And I thought that the Sixers starters had kind of checked out, and then you had to ask them to come back into the game. You know, Danny Green said something that I thought was really interesting. I'll tell you what he said from his time with Sacramento, San Antonio. Wait till you hear what Danny Green said. This is really interesting. I got that coming up next on the Sports Bash, brought to you by John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer. Get yours online at Deere.com. Danny Green played for a title team in San Antonio. And he talked about the Nets resting so many guys and why they did it. It ties back to his days in San Antonio. I'll tell you what he said coming up next. Sports Bash Live. I got a Sports Bash Cash code word coming up at 2:55. It's worth $1,000. So listen for the code word. Enter it on our website, 973ESPN.com, or download the free mobile app and enter it right on your phone. Mike, I agree that Embiid cannot be guarded. He's unstoppable. But even if he averages 42 and 10 against the Nets, the Sixers may be hard-pressed to win a series. Last night he had 39 in 33 minutes, and Kyrie had 37 in 33. If the Nets three are healthy, figure 100 combined points per game. Tough to overcome that type of scoring from just three players plus the bench. Thoughts? Well, their bench doesn't give them much. Keep in mind, if those guys are scoring 100, their bench doesn't get a whole heck of a lot. I mean, who else on that bench really scores for them? I mean, Shamet can shoot a little bit. I mean, they don't have a whole heck of a lot after that. And if they're getting 100, which I think is okay, I mean, they're all under 30 a game. They all average a little under 30 a game. So I would say more in the 90 range is where you would say the three of those. And that's their averages against, bad teams, good teams, mediocre teams, good defenders, bad defenders. They're not getting the top defenders every single night. The Sixers in a series, I think, are going to be able to defend them better than anybody else. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be able to stop them. The key is, and it's what I said yesterday on the show, the key for the Sixers, you kind of saw that yesterday, is Embiid just has a monster game, but then someone else has to be there with him. And they got the monster game yesterday from Tobias Harris. Now, keep in mind, for everybody who's kind of talking about what happened in that game yesterday, Tobias Harris did not finish the game. He did not come back to play that game last night. He had a knee problem. He said he was 50-50 to even play the game to begin with. He ended up playing, but he did not finish the game. The Sixers did not put him back out there. If you noticed that Furkan Korkmaz closed the game last night, not the greatest defender in the world. But that game last night, Embiid 39, Harris 26. That's the formula for the Sixers. Milton with 15, Ben Simmons with 17. I'd like to see either Green or Curry get into double figures. That's what they need. One of those two guys in double figures. Harris with the big game, Embiid with the monster game, Simmons and Milton both, 15, 17, but they need Green or Curry, one of those two, to shoot well. They only shot 2 of 6 from three-pointers last night, those two guys combined. Korkmaz was only 1 of 2. They did not shoot the three. Korkmaz was 2 of 5, excuse me. They did not shoot the three, those two guys. The Sixers shot the three great last night, 46%. It's really the difference in the game. Brooklyn shot 19% from three last night. 19. They were 4 of 21 from three. Ben Simmons defensively was a problem for some of the secondary players. Now, keep in mind, he's not going to be defending the secondary. He's not defending Shamet. He's not going to defend, who the heck did it? Luwawu Cabarrot. Those guys aren't getting minutes in a series. Shamet is, not Luwawu Cabarrot. 609-403-0973. How about the 2011 Mavericks? They had Dirk Nowitzki. They had Jason Kidd. They had Hall of Famers on that team. So they had transcendent players. Dirk Nowitzki is one of the 10 best players maybe to ever play the game. You're better than that, buddy. Come on, man. Dirk Nowitzki is, you can blame him for the game that we have now if you don't like it. That's how good he was. All these 7-footers shooting threes, all these 7-footers not wanting to be inside players, they want to be outside players. Yeah, that's Dirk Nowitzki's fault. He happened to be on that Mavericks team that you're talking about that apparently you're discrediting. They didn't have these 3 superstars that you envision like the super teams do, but they had Jason Kidd. They had Dirk, who's maybe one of the top 10 players to ever play. Danny Green last night had something interesting that he said. Durant didn't play. Harden, we knew, was hurt. LaMarcus Aldridge ended up retiring today, so he's done for the season and his career, by the way. But Danny Green said when he was in San Antonio sometimes we didn't play everybody so that teams didn't know how to guard us, how to play us. He admitted that. Now, Steve Nash said, we prioritize the importance of health more so than winning a regular season game. But Danny Green's saying that when I was in San Antonio, I think that's, by the way, pretty alarming for the league to see that. Wait a second. You guys are admitting that you didn't play certain guys because you didn't want them to know how to guard you? That doesn't sound like, hey, we want these guys to rest or we want these guys, to not get hurt. That sounds like a strategic reason. I don't want to play Tim Duncan tonight. I don't want them to know how to guard Tim Duncan. That's essentially what he's saying that the Nets did last night, is we don't want you to get any intel on what to do with Kevin Durant. We don't want you to get any intel on what to do if those 2 guys or 3 guys. Now, they couldn't play Harden last night. We won't know until we get to a playoff matchup between these 2 teams how they actually match up. But the Nets can take something from the game last night on how they defended Joel Embiid late in that game. There's no question about that. If you are Steve Nash, you better be sure he's watching what he saw in the last 5 minutes of that game, right? Nick Claxton, who I thought was a problem defensively last night in the last 5 minutes of the game. He's a 6'11" guy who's just, he's a beanpole. Tall, lanky, a lot of arms, a lot of length. Yeah. And I think, to be honest with you, LaMarcus Aldridge retiring actually helps the Nets out. LaMarcus Aldridge is not a great defensive player. He certainly can't defend Joel Embiid. And he was taking a lot of Claxton's minutes when he started to come over here. Blake Griffin, by the way, DNP, left knee last night. I think you'll see Blake Griffin play in the playoffs, but what are they going to do with him? He's not defending Joel Embiid. But I think the fact that LaMarcus Aldridge ended up retiring today is actually a benefit for the Knicks in this series. Because Claxton's a problem because of his length and athleticism. Aldridge was taking some of his minutes. Claxton getting those minutes back, I think, is a benefit for the Nets, not a detriment. DeAndre Jordan, who had a good game last night in terms of the rebounds. He had 14 rebounds. He had 12 points, 5 assists. He had a nice stat game. He had no shot last night against Joel Embiid. DeAndre Jordan, who basically gained some fame because he was on the Lob City teams. DeAndre Jordan's a stiff. If he's not on Lob City with those Clippers teams, he's a useless individual for the Brooklyn Nets. You have a guy who's 6'11", 265 pounds. He can't defend. And he's there for one reason, to defend and rebound. He can't defend, and he has Zippo offensive game. So they got a big problem in the middle. I mean, DeAndre Jordan played last night, right? They started him. He had been a DNP for a while. I think he missed like 6-7 games in a row because when they got LaMarcus Aldridge, he couldn't play Aldridge and Jordan and Claxton and Griffin. So he was DNP'd. They called him out to start last night. I mean, I thought he played pretty well considering he couldn't defend Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid had 30 at halftime last night. I think he had 28 at half. He might have had 30. All I know is I bet 30 and a half over. And by halftime, I was already cashing that baby out. 609-403-0973. I also told you to take Ben Simmons on the over last night. Mike, same could be said for the guys not playing. They won't know how to defend the Sixers. Watching tape in practice can only take you so far. Yeah, but you're talking about Kevin Durant and James Harden. Those guys are different. It's one thing if you're asking a rookie who's just in the league or, a guy. These guys, they know all the tricks to the trade. So your point is valid. It's well taken. Let me bring up some more of the comments in the chat section on the video over here. 609-403-0973. Kyle Dubray. What's up, Kyle? He's watching on YouTube. Mike, the Sixers may not have the best roster, but they are the best team in the league. That matters, by the way. The best roster doesn't always win. You know, I heard this morning, I think it was, Tim Legler, who, by the way, Legler will be on the show next week. He texted me today. He'll be on the show next week. He's going to come on when the Sixers play Milwaukee. So we'll have Legler on next week. Actually was texting back and forth with Legs today. He said this morning on KJZ, and there's a reason why I'm playing this.
You can argue this is the best stretch of basketball he's ever played. Look at the last 5 games. The guy's made almost 8 threes a night on 54% shooting from the three-point line and averaging 41 points a game. So this is Steph Curry at his best. And we thought that was probably behind him. We knew he'd still be really good, but not this good. Fortunately for us, he's not close to the end.
So, and I don't, he's saying that Steph Curry is playing the best he's ever played. And the Warriors are under 500. Well, the team around him stinks. This is a clear indication that Steph Curry needs a lot of help. This is the best he's ever been. And they're under 500. We talk about you have to have these certain type of players. Steph Curry's a great player. This is the best he's ever played. And they're under 500. It's so important to have that special player. And when I talk about a special player, like LeBron James took a Nets team that was a Cavs team that had less talent than the Golden State Warriors currently do and brought them to the finals. That Warriors team isn't even in the playoffs right now. And Tim Legler just said that's the best Warriors team, best he's played as a Warrior. So it really is impactful to show what having those type of players means. Tim Legler this morning on KJZ, when asked who his MVP in the NBA is currently, he said this.
He's a completely different player in terms of his mentality. He comes to the arena now looking to dominate. I think his approach is much more businesslike. He's clearly has had a transformation with his conditioning and his stamina. So he's able to stay on the court longer stretches and also be there and be really good in the last 6 minutes of games, which is something he has struggled with in the past. So for me, it's night and day looking at the first part of his career with what he is doing this year. At the end of the day, he's going to get in 50-plus games if he stays healthy the rest of the year. 50-plus in a 72-game season is more than enough for me to say that this guy is the MVP.
He's talking about Joel Embiid. So we talk about, do you have the best player on the best team? He thinks the Sixers might. You have to have one of them. You have to have a player that can be considered the best player on the best team. And so far, the Sixers have it. We didn't see Brooklyn's last night because they have one too. It was a little disappointing, but the Sixers won, and they did it in the way we asked. Joel Embiid dominate the game. He did. Kyle, good question. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. I got a Sports Bash cash code word coming for you guys. If you're listening on the radio or watching on the live stream, stay there and enter the key word. The code word is coming right now. It's worth $1,000. Here we go.
To $10,000. Enter the code words every day at 973ESPN.com or with the free mobile app. The more codes you enter, the more chances you have to win. Up to $10,000. Here's the Sports Bash Cash code word.
Feet. F-E-E-T. Feet. Enter it now on our website, 973ESPN.com, or use the free mobile app. Sports Bash Cash is brought to you by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union for all your lending needs. Get the next Sports Bash Cash code word at 355.
It's Sports Bash Cash 10 times a day. Every weekday at 55 after each hour from 9:55 a.m. to 6:55 p.m. Listen all day for your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000.
When it comes to wings in the Delaware Valley, nobody beats the Piccalilli Inn. Enjoy ice-cold beer and their world-famous wings, tails, or ears on the Pick patio. Try new flavors like garlic parmesan, Jim Beam maple, or smoker. You'll see why people drive from all over for the Picks. World-famous wings and home-style favorites. Whether you're headed to or from the shore, for eat-in or take-out, make tonight the night. You visit the one, the only, the original Piccalilli Inn, Route 206, Chemung, Jersey. For live music and specials, like them on Facebook.
Get in the zone, AutoZone.
Welcome to AutoZone. What are you working on today? Of course, we have everything you need for that big brake job. Right now, you can save 15% when you buy any Duralast brake pads and any 2 Duralast rotors. It's a great way to save while you take on the full job. Oh, and one tip. Go for a nice, easy drive after you finish the job. It'll help break in your new brakes. For more tips, visit AutoZone.com/DIY. Restrictions apply.
Get in the zone, AutoZone.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Mike Gill.
All right, hour 2 of the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I'm Mike Gill. I see Jay Fitz dancing back there. He's not actually on the camera. There he goes. Now he's on the camera. I don't even know what I'm actually playing right now, to be honest with you, because of the fact, Jay Fitz, because of the fact that we do the show on YouTube now, I'm not allowed to use actual real music, so I have to use whatever free audio tracks I get from royalty free from YouTube or so I don't know what that was.
Look, I'm going to be honest with you, though. That's a beast all across the board. And if you listen, this is like a little tip. A lot of people will not realize. If you watch ESPN digitally, you watch some of our shows that I host on other platforms, there's times where you're listening to a song and you're like, God, that feels a lot like the song I know. Yeah, there's a reason. Licensing, as a former musician, let me tell you, licensing is its own beast across the board. So I feel you on that one.
It has to, I used to be known for the music I played. Like when you'd be on, I'd be like, oh, do you know Zwan?
Yeah.
You know, side project of Billy Corrigan. So we could have, but I can't really do that anymore. But hey, I could see you, which helps.
As a music guy, by the way, and I know we got other stuff to get to. I'm going to hijack real quick and promote something, though. I've spent the last several days in LA because for the NFL draft a couple of years ago, people may have seen it. I did sit downs with different country artists for the draft in Nashville. This year, with the draft being adjacent to the country music Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I've spent the last several days getting to hang out with different Hall of Famers in LA. So they're going to run those throughout ABC and ESPN throughout all 3 days of the draft. But I've been able to talk to Joan Jett and Joe Elliott from Def Leppard, Shaka Khan, Earth, Wind and Fire. Richie Sambora is coming up in the next day. So it's been a really incredible time, and you'll get to see those cut up in little 30-second blasts throughout all of the draft. So a really cool way to bring some personality Rock and Roll Hall of Famers into this conversation.
Before I did this, now I've been hosting this show for about, 15 years or so, but I did alt rock radio from Afternoon Drive. I was the afternoon guy on the Howard Stern station. So I was 21 at the time. So my life was kind of cool back then. Now I just talk about sports,
Dude, but I'll tell you, it's rare that I'm just a melting fan child of somebody. That's where I am in general. Richie Sambora, my first concert was Bon Jovi. So the number of times that I've just had to sit there and say, don't turn into Chris Farley. That's all I'm hoping is that I don't Chris Farley, Richie Sambora. That's it.
Nice. All right. We'll transition from Richie Sambora, Chris Farley over to, I want to get your thoughts on what happened in the Sixers-Nets game last night. You guys had it on the radio and on the network last night. And no Kevin Durant. Now, you knew Harden was out, but does the NBA have an issue, or is this just an unfixable problem?
I think it's an unfixable problem. I mean, there's a little bit of an element of we've become so championship focused. That's all we care about. So what you end up with is even in big matchups, and last night was a big matchup, when you're missing superstars playing, you got to look at it and say, well, what do we put weight in? We devalued the regular season in every possible way so much because we won't give any accomplishment credit for what players do in the regular season. Russ can average a triple-double. We don't care. Giannis can be the MVP 2 years in a row. We don't care. It becomes only about what they've done in the championships. Well, if that's the culture we're going to create, then we, by default, as an NBA media, have devalued the regular season to the point that there's really no need to get guys on the court. I've been, and we've said it before on this show, I do not believe in Brooklyn until we see these guys get any time together. And I feel like I'm the only one because we just believe that this is a video game and they're all going to be fine. And that's how they're treating the regular season.
Right. I mean, so the message last night is this is for the number one seed against a team that is tied with you. We're playing you head to head. You take that game. We don't care. I mean, that's a little bit of a problem. I mean, what you're saying, though, is that the culture has become, do you think the fans, though, because all right, for instance, here in Philly, and I think everywhere now, fans, a lot of them have embraced losing, right? We embrace losing because we want draft picks. But have they embraced, I don't care about the regular season?
I think they have to a certain extent because it all comes in steps. You're right. At some point you embrace losing because you want draft picks. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you say, well, wait, now I want championships. There's this moment for me as a Raiders fan, right? When my team's 4-12, all I want to do is be relevant. Then my team gets relevant and they're 8-8. And I'm like, well, 8-8 stinks. Nobody wants that. And then you get to 11-5. And at some point you're going to say, well, I don't want this quarterback. He can't win a Super Bowl. We suddenly forget every step, every chapter in the evolution of success that comes for a franchise. But where we are in the NBA at this point, like if the Sixers finish with the number 1 seed in the playoffs and they get ousted in the second round, is everybody going to be happy? No. If the Nets finish as a 4 seed but win the championship, that's all anybody cares about. Like we go through this marathon in the NBA of a regular season, and people just don't care what happens, because unless you win the championship, nothing has value. And I think it's a flawed argument. It's no different than we look at Michael Jordan and say, well, he was undefeated in the finals, without even acknowledging the fact that Michael Jordan had to at some point get through the Pistons to get to the finals. But then we turn around to LeBron and we say LeBron 6 because he's lost in the finals. Like, it's all about just that one series. So if it's all about that one series, who cares about a game for the 1 seed?
It's crazy. I mean, and like, I'm thinking to myself, man, they just literally say, you know what, you guys be the number 1 seed. I don't care. But we talk about all the time, like, how much home court advantage matters and all this thing. And the Nets last night essentially said, hey, look, if we play in the Eastern Conference Finals, that's okay. You have home court advantage. We don't mind. That's all right. I don't know. I feel like you're right that we've gotten to this point that anybody could do anything, and I only care about it if they do it in the playoffs, which is, I guess, is fair. Like Tobias Harris, for instance, here. He's having a great regular season, but no one's buying in because I want to see him do it in the playoffs because he's never had playoff success. And I feel like if that's all we care about, we're really devaluing what sports was supposed to be and mean, like the journey, the ride, the start to finish.
Well, I mean, what's the point? Like, at some point, if you can't enjoy this sort of game, then what's the point? You're right about Tobias, by the way, and I don't understand, again, why we're doing that to Tobias, but we're not doing it to Harden, who flat out went out and just forgot, as Sarah Spain always says, he forgot how to basketball in a game 7, and it cost his team a series. But we forgive that for some reason because now we have this video game version of the Nets. But you're absolutely right. Like, I genuinely ask people now, if you are a sports fan in this era, what's the point? Because to me, the point is to see my team win a bunch of games and feel like we have a real shot at doing something great. If you're not enjoying that entire process, then why? Like, why are you even going through it? It's like you're going to a great restaurant and you only care about dessert. The rest of the money's just wasted. The rest of the time's just wasted.
Yeah, Jay Fitz with me, ESPN Radio, Spain and Fitz, weeknights on 97.3 ESPN. All right, I say this. Only 5 teams can win the title. Lakers, Clippers, Bucks, Nets, Sixers. They have the only 5 players that can be the best player on the best team. That's it. Is there more? Am I missing any?
No, I think you're fair. I mean, a lot of people are going to say that you should put Denver or Utah in that conversation, and I just won't go there. When you get into a series, particularly, it's about is my best guy better than your best guy? And part of the reason that I love the Lakers so much out of the West still is that we all know that as much as it can be enticing to watch other things happen, if AD and LeBron are healthy, their best 2 is better than anybody else's best 2, and they played together enough to know how to manage that best 2. So I don't think you're wrong at all. It's the playoffs are about, can your team figure out when you know the other move? We've all felt this. If you've ever played any playground basketball in your life, you know that you can go out and have some success in one night against somebody that's never come to your playground before. When you're playing against the guy that you've known for the last 5 years, and he knows that every time you go left, you're actually going to turn back around and go right. Like, can you find a way to work through that? There are a lot of NBA teams that just can't. The best of the best that you just mentioned, you can't just study film on them and figure out in a 7-game series. So yeah, I believe in that. And I also still believe we're sleeping on Milwaukee just because of the past that they've had. Giannis is in many ways even better this year. They are better this year. I think Milwaukee's the team that we're sleeping on.
I included them, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, noted.
But you saw Joel Embiid last night, and the Nets, who everybody feels is a super team and yada, yada, they have nobody that can stop him. Is that enough that they have Embiid and they have no one to stop them for the Sixers to be able to overtake the Nets? Now, the Bucks are different. The Bucks is a weird one because Giannis, we've seen his game not translate to the playoffs because he hasn't had the help. Does he have enough help now?
Yeah, I think Giannis has better help, but it's still a bad matchup with the Sixers, right? Like, the Sixers just know how to get past Giannis. And so as much as, yes, the shooting, Drew Holiday's been just a delight for the Bucks, and I don't know that we're giving him enough love. But that being said, the Sixers feel like a bad matchup for Milwaukee, and the Sixers absolutely are capable of beating this Nets team. I don't know why we're sleeping on the way Philly has played throughout the entirety of the regular season, and the domination that they can have. Like the trust the process thing became such a laughable quote at some point that now everybody just lumps Simmons and Embiid together in this, like, here you are and this is cute and it's fun, but it's not going to result in anything. I'm not willing to say that at all, and Tobias Harris, by the way, I think can succeed in the playoffs. So yes, they've got the two players that they will need to have enough stardom, and they've got the shooting from the outside to be able to go ahead and stretch people out. Yeah, I think the Sixers can get themselves in the finals. I just don't think anybody can beat the Lakers.
That should be fun. All right. I want to flip to the draft because not that I feel that it's incorrect, but is Trevor Lawrence the most home run prospect, or are we just assuming that he's going to be great? And because we don't even investigate him, we don't look at him, we don't even watch the tape, we just said he's the number one pick. It doesn't matter. But is it as home run as everybody is making it out to be?
Yeah, it is. And you know what? And I'll even double down. Like I saw the quotes with Sports Illustrated about like awards don't define him, Super Bowls don't define him. I don't care. He's so good. I mean, national championships, from what he said, probably didn't define him either. And he still went out there and played his tail off for Clemson over the course of this. And, I think one of the most impressive things to me a couple of years ago, standing in New Orleans on the sideline while he was trying to win a national championship, going through the playoff run in general, was listening to him and his command pre-snap. Now, I think absolutely the way that he attacks offenses pre-snap, his ability to read what's coming, adjust out of it, and get to the best play is an undervalued portion of what he does. Also, unlike some of the other prospects we're talking about, as good as Clemson's line is and as good as their defense is, their wide receivers haven't necessarily been the same game changers that Alabama's have, for example. He's a transcendent talent. If he doesn't win at the highest level, it's because Jacksonville screwed him up, but also Jacksonville's still bad because they know how to screw it up. So this is the same team that a few years ago we were sold that had figured out how to build an entire roster to such a level they were going to contend for years no matter their quarterback situation, and they created such a terrible culture. Everybody just screamed to get out of that city. So Jacksonville has to not screw up Trevor Lawrence, but I don't think Trevor Lawrence will screw up Jacksonville.
Okay, this is back to our conversation on the NBA that one of our viewers chimed in on. He said, what if less teams made the playoffs? Would that make it more competitive?
Yes, 1,000%. If less teams made the playoffs, I think we'd care more. Also, if the first couple of rounds were best of 5 instead of best of 7, more can go wrong in a best of 5 series. That would also make home court matter a lot more. I think that's a great. If I ran the NBA, my first step would be to let less teams in the playoffs and then to shorten that first round series to best of 5 like it was years ago.
Right, because I guess the notion of, like, if you – what do you let in 6 teams and give the 2 teams a bye, or just let 4 teams in?
6 and 2 is good because now you've also given me an incentive to want one of those top 2 seeds. I mean, think about the NFL and how much we were talking about. Once you limited it to one team getting a bye, boy, it made the top of the rankings matter more in each conference, right? Like, that's where I look at it all day. If you give me a bye for the top 2 seeds, that's going to be significant for the playoff run. That'd be huge. And then let the rest of them sort of battle it out and limit down to 6. And forget this play-in tournament. I don't want teams that are barely interested in trying to get themselves to a 10 seed so that they can maybe get beat in the first round of the playoffs. Like, that's just garbage.
All right. There was a no-hitter in baseball last night. Does the no-hitter matter in baseball where everybody strikes out and it's acceptable?
Yeah. I think there's 2 things that make the no-hitter less impactful to a lot of us. And number one is, as you mentioned, it's such a, swing or miss batting approach at this point. But number 2 is the number of pitchers that are involved in it so often. I mean, we've talked about how we're just going to see this year a litany of guys that are on the mound every single game. To me, it sort of devalues a little bit of it. Like, I love watching a pitcher that's at the end of his gas tank and saying, man, can he get just a little bit more out of this run? That to me is part of the excitement. So yeah, it's definitely a little devalued to me.
All right. I think, by the way, I like the rule. I hate the DH. I do not want the DH, but I like the rule that has the DH tied to the starting pitcher. And when the pitcher comes out, you lose the DH. I'm okay with that compromise.
I think that's a great, yeah. I'm all in with you on that. And I'm also all in with you that I'm not a DH fan. Like, it's never been a great thing to me, but I like at least at some level of meet in the middle.
Yeah, I think that would be because, the DH is going to be in the National League, I guess, at some point, which would break my heart. I'm a baseball guy. I hate the DH. He's Jason Fitz, host of Spain and Fitz on 97.3 ESPN, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Follow him at Jason Fitz and he'll be back here next week as we continue to get ready for that draft. Check out Jason's coverage of the draft 2 weeks from today, the NFL draft. All right, man, we'll see you then.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
All right, Jay Fitz, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He'll be back on Wednesday in his normal spot next week. He was traveling yesterday. Hey, when we come back, the Sports Bash, we'll talk a little Sixers Nets with national basketball writer Keith Smith. And the Sports Bash is brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan, now open on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot. Online, mattblattnissan.com. I have a Sports Bash Cash code word coming up at 3:55 today. Don't go away. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app, and watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Just go to 973ESPN.com. Sports Bash with you on a Thursday. Tomorrow, Sal Paolantonio, Adam Kaplan. We got a lot of football on a Friday edition, Happy Hour Friday, as we do it with the PT tomorrow night as well. And Bob Wankel talks a little Phillies tomorrow, as he does every Monday and Friday right here on the Sports Bash. Thursdays, we talk hoops, Sixers, Nets last night. Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Yahoo Sports covers the NBA, does an excellent job. And he, like all guests, appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Let's get into it, Keith, because a lot of people talking about the battle for number one last night that the Nets apparently didn't care too much about.
Yeah, I think the Nets have made it kind of clear that they are viewing it as health over seed. They're not apparently very worried about having to go through both Milwaukee and Philadelphia if that's the way things line up. So they're content to make sure that their guys are ready to go. And I think Philadelphia did a good job of taking advantage last night and getting that win, because I think I get where the Nets are coming from. Health should trump all other things. But you really want to be that number one seed in the East. You do not want to have to play two of those other teams and have to try to get through them. You want to make your path easier if at all possible.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, if you're the 2 or the 3, you're going to have to face that team in the second round. The 1 seed is going to get the 4, most likely the 4-5 winner. It's definitely a different and easier path. And then if you're the 2 or the 3, you're going to have to go and play that 7th game possibly in Philadelphia, where they are a much better team. I mean, this year they're much better on the road, but I don't know the mindset there. But I want to ask you, Keith, you follow the league in general, not just the Sixers. Is this an NBA problem that they are going to have to look at, or is there one of those things where they got to just put their palms up and say, hey, this is what it is?
Yeah, I think this year, especially given all of the injuries we've seen and the COVID concerns and things like that, this is the year you just kind of say, hey, it is what it is. We understand teams are, prioritizing what they need to get there health-wise, where we're not going to do anything about this. Long-term, yeah, it's the issue we've kind of always talked about. It goes really back to those Spurs teams when they, started, very frequently sitting guys like Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, because they were looking at it as, hey, we're in this thing for a marathon, not a sprint, and winning every possible regular season game just isn't a real thing we're looking to do. So there's you can see both sides of it, but I think in the end, you want to have teams at their best in the playoffs. And if this is how we get there, this is how we get there.
Well, I mean, I could see that point is, hey, Milwaukee ran out to 60-plus wins. Atlanta's done it in the past, and they get knocked out. That's one thing. Having the option of playing for the number one seed and sitting your guys out, as opposed to saying, hey, we could have done it Monday night against Minnesota. We have Philadelphia on Wednesday. Let's sit them out against Minnesota and go after Philly. I mean, so there are strategical ways you can do it, no?
Yeah, there definitely is. I think what you kind of almost look at it like is, now you hope if you're the Nets, you believe, hey, we can beat Minnesota even without our guys. But I think you're probably looking at it as, why are we going to risk that in the Philadelphia game? Because we knew James Harden was going to be out anyway. In the Philadelphia game, if we get there, that one's more of a toss-up even with our guys playing. Let's make sure we get the assured win, and then we'll kind of play it out and see how it goes against Philly. And I'm guessing that was the decision-making from Steve Nash and all parties involved.
All right, Keith Smith, what, if anything, did you take from that game then last night with a half a Nets team against that Sixers team? It was a 22-point game. The Nets' second unit kind of got back into the game. The Sixers had to put their starters back in. They didn't really seem like they were all that ready to get back into that game. But what did you take, if anything, from Sixers-Nets? Because a lot of people were looking forward to this. Like, all right, let's see how these two match up. They're tied for first, but the Nets have been undermanned all year. They have not played with the big three but 8 times. Did you get anything from that game last night?
Yeah, the couple of takeaways that I had out of it were, first is the Nets have no answer for Joel Embiid. And not that anybody has a real good answer for him, but the Nets really have nothing. There is just nothing that they can do. And, this is, I like to call it, this is a new Embiid. He is now playing deeper in the games, playing better. He's in better shape. He looks better deeper into these games, and that's really hard to handle because it used to be, all right, let him get his 35, 40 points by the end of the third quarter, and then in the fourth quarter he'll be exhausted and he'll just be floating around the perimeter launching up jump shots, and he's not necessarily that guy that he was the last 2 years. So I think that's the problem. On the other end, it's been a problem for Philadelphia for a number of years now, and I continue to think it's still an issue. They don't have an answer for quick scoring point guards, guys who are going to have the ball in their hand a lot. Kyrie Irving, he's an offensive dynamo anyway, but he had a really nice game, and that's been a problem for Philly. And there's a chance, you may see a handful of guys like that throughout the playoffs, and that's going to be something that they're going to have to try to get some kind of answer for. I don't really know if it's, do you play Matisse Thybulle more? Do you maybe go to Tyrese Maxey on occasion? That's a little tough, and it's hard to envision Doc Rivers trusting a rookie to play major playoff minutes, but that is something I've got my eye on.
What about Hill when he's ready to play? Can he be that guy?
Yeah, I think so to some extent. It's really hard to count on anything from George Hill at this point when you haven't seen him really all season long. You haven't, or it's been months since we've seen him. Haven't seen him at all for Philadelphia. So hopefully that's what he'll give them, is a guy who's, at least a little bit better of a defensive option against those smaller, quicker guards. But that's, you're asking a lot of a veteran guy to say, hey, go in there and be kind of a shutdown defensive guy. And, the nice thing is if Hill can do that, he gives you a little bit more balance because he can make some shots. He's going to move the ball the right way, where with Thybulle and Maxey, that's still a lot more of a question mark.
Keith Smith, Yahoo Sports, covers the NBA at Keith Smith NBA. Danny Green said something interesting after the game. I don't know what the NBA would think about this. He said, when I was in San Antonio, sometimes we didn't play everybody, so that teams didn't know how to guard us or how to play us. Does the league want to hear that?
Yeah, I don't think they really want to hear that, but I don't think they want to hear anything that involves not playing guys. But there is truth to that. There's a big belief in don't show anybody anything in the regular season. That's been kind of a hallmark of a number of teams going deep into history over the last, let's call it 15 or so years. Is we're just not going to show you much because we're more concerned about that we have an upper hand when we get to the playoffs. There's a strong belief every year. There's teams that you mentioned Milwaukee before, Utah this year. These teams that kind of run out, they win a whole bunch of games, and then if they can't get it done in the playoffs, you start to look at it and say, well, did you show everything you had? And now there's all sorts of film, and teams get a sense of who you are and a better idea of defending you. Versus these teams that they kind of play a little bit of possum and lay back a little bit in the regular season, and that can work at times too. So I get what Danny Green is saying, that there is something to that.
Yeah, and I know that the Sixers last night, they basically played everybody except George Hill, who hasn't played yet, and Dwight Howard. Their backup center was not in that game. The Nets, of course, were missing a whole bunch of guys, so it was unfortunate there. The Bucks, though, so everybody's talking Nets is certainly the favorite for many, and a lot of people think because the Sixers doing what they do. Where, in terms of closeness, are the Bucks right there? Are they better than either one of those teams? And we're not talking about it. I feel like the Bucks are kind of the team that, hey, they've won all these games, they haven't won, and now this year they're lesser, and then people aren't talking about them as much. But where do you put them in ranking them with Philly and Brooklyn?
It all depends on the health of Giannis Antetokounmpo. It started to worry me over the last week or so that he is still not back. I think we're on about 2.5 weeks now or so of him missing games due to knee soreness. And that guy misses the game here, misses the game there. Okay, that's, understandable. That's a management kind of thing. But when guys are missing this long, that starts to say to me, boy, there could be something bigger there. And this just worries me. Is this going to be one of those things where he gets back, plays, for a week, and then he's all of a sudden out again for another week and those kind of things. But if he's healthy, if this is just, hey, we understand, the last couple of years winning all those games didn't do much for us, so we're prioritizing health and having everybody ready. If that's where they're at, I have them right on par with Brooklyn and Philadelphia, just because Giannis is that good. And I think for the Bucks, less is more. They've got, instead of having 12 good NBA rotation players, they've got about 8 guys now that you feel like are really good rotation players. They can really rely on those guys. They've upped the minutes limits for guys like Giannis and Middleton, and Drew Holiday's playing, a good amount of minutes, so they should be able to step those guys up to 35, 40 minutes a night in the full playoffs, which they couldn't do last season. So I think you add all those things up, and Milwaukee's going to be a really tough team. But if Giannis isn't healthy and right, they're a team that you could very easily see teams start jockeying to get into the 6th seed to try to think, all right, that's our way to get through the first round of the playoffs.
LaMarcus Aldridge abruptly retired today. It was a health reason that he did so. Does that impact the Nets? I mean, I guess we didn't get to see him all that much there, but was that a guy they were counting on? Or does it actually help them in the long run? I really think Claxton's a better fit for them, especially against Philly.
Yeah, I agree with you on Claxton. I was very concerned when they signed Blake Griffin and started talking about playing him at the 5 a lot, that you were going to see Claxton lose minutes there. Then they kind of doubled down on that with Aldridge, and Claxton did start to lose some minutes, but they really kind of excised DeAndre Jordan from the rotation. And it was, all right, Claxton's still going to get his 15 minutes a night. They're just going to come off the bench, and it's only probably going to be about 15. So now what probably happens is Jordan's probably a bigger part of the rotation moving forward, and then Claxton's probably going to be in there for, maybe 22, 25 minutes a night. And I don't know that LaMarcus Aldridge at the state he was in is a major loss for that Nets team, because he was far more of an offensive impact than he was a defensive impact, and they've already got all sorts of offense. What you do lose is you could kind of throw it into him on second units and kind of play through him and say, all right, go to the left block and do what you've done for 15 years. And, and he can still get you baskets there. But at this point, yeah, he wasn't going to be a guy, I think, that was going to have a huge impact in a meaningful playoff series. So I don't know that it's all that big of a loss on court for them.
All right, Keith Smith, we'll leave you with this, obviously. What is your take? A lot of talk about this play-in, matchups, the playoff implications that Dallas and Cuban mentioning, and the fact that what do you think about the NBA sticking with that play-in format?
Yeah, I don't mind the play-in tournament itself. I do wish they'd done what they did in the bubble, which was stick with the standings qualifier. I think if a team is 5 games or more behind, they should just be out. That you haven't done enough at that point to make the playoffs. And I know people scream and yell, well, injuries and all these other things. Injuries happen every year to every team, but I don't mind the idea of the play-in, because I do think it's kind of given new life to some of these teams that at this point in a normal season would have turned and started. Let's put it politically correct, reprioritizing the rest of the season, or call it what it is, tanking. They would have been going that route, but so I like that part of it. So that part is interesting to me. I hope the NBA sticks with this for 2-3 years, so we get a real sense of how do teams approach the trade deadline. Do teams care about all right, we'll get into the play-in, we'll win our way in there, and then we'll see what we can do, or a team's going to get to the play-in and be like, we don't really care if we get in. We'd rather have the lottery pick, and if we get bounced, we get bounced. So that's going to be something interesting to monitor. But this 1-year sample in this weird season is not going to be enough. So we've got to run this thing for a couple, maybe 2-3 years, really start to get a good sense of what does this look like before we can make final decisions. But I like it. I just wish they'd make a couple of tweaks.
All right, that's down the stretch we come. About 19, 18 games left for many of these teams. Sixers right now, 1 seed in the East. The matchups in the East would be interesting. Sixers, Hornets, they're the 8 if the play-in games and whatever happens there. Nets, Heat, that would be interesting. Bucks, Knicks, and then Hawks, Celtics. So the Celtics have been playing much better. I'll leave you. I know you cover and watch a lot of Celtics. They've won 4 in a row, 7 out of 10. Are they starting to get it right?
Yeah, they really are, and they've been pretty good since the All-Star break-ish. They came out a little bit rough right after, but they've been playing pretty well, been playing really well this month. And I think what it is, a lot of it comes down to they finally got healthy. They've got their guys back. Their rotation is filled out a little bit more. They haven't had Evan Fournier, who, by all accounts, it sounds like, unfortunately, has COVID. So we'll see when he returns to the lineup. Hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later for them. But yeah, the Celtics, all the pieces are kind of finally kind of falling into the right places now. Guys aren't having to be asked to do more and those kind of things. And just like he did last year, at a similar point in the season, games-wise, Jason Tatum is really taking off and kind of going nuclear. And it's to the point where it's going to be a question of, can anybody stop this guy? And that's a big part of what allowed Boston to make that run to the Eastern Conference Finals. Was he was so good, even despite the pause in the season, when they restarted and then in the playoffs. So that's something that, I think Celtics fans are starting to finally see the team they thought they might see this year. It just took kind of a long, winding road to get there.
And real quick, Atlanta, they've been holding on to the 4, 7-10, 3 in a row. McMillan has really changed things for that Hawks team. Are they someone to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think so, because they've been doing it with all sorts of injuries. They have had a lot of guys out. Recently, it's been Trae Young and John Collins have been out. Their young forward duo of DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish have missed considerable time. They've never seen Chris Dunn this season. Danilo Gallinari, one of their key free agent acquisitions, missed a lot of time. Bogdan Bogdanovic missed a lot of time early in the year. So that's what's really impressive about this. And under Nate McMillan, they look a lot more organized. They look a lot more together. They're really executing fairly well defensively, which is a big improvement for them because they were not a very good defensive team. And when you have a guy like Trae Young, he can cause you a lot of problems as an opponent just because you've got to pick him up anywhere from inside half court. So that bends your defense in a way you may be a little bit uncomfortable. So, yeah, they're definitely a team to keep an eye on. If they can get through that first round, if you're Philly or Brooklyn or, if Milwaukee can get up to the 1 seed, the Hawks aren't a team you necessarily really want to play in the second round because they're young. They're going to be kind of playing with nothing to lose. And Trae Young is just so good. He's going to give you it's just going to be more kind of trouble in the second round than you really want to deal with. It's just going to be a little bit of a headache, and that's going to be something to definitely keep an eye on moving forward.
Yep, I agree with you there. They're a fun team. They're an interesting team and a team you probably don't want to match up with in those Eastern Conference playoffs. Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. The NBA playoffs about a month and a half away, and he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Keith, take care, pal.
Absolutely. Thank you. Y'all stay safe. You and yours.
All right, there he goes. Keith Smith, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He'll be back next week as the Sixers. He'll be on Thursday when the Sixers get ready to take on the Milwaukee Bucks. That one should be interesting. They have back-to-back against the Bucks next week. They play Thursday, Saturday in Milwaukee. They'll be the next big games. Will Giannis Antetokounmpo be back? Hey, I want to tell you about my friends at PropSwap.com. We've been talking a lot about PropSwap, but I'm not sure that you guys fully understand what you're missing. Let me break it down to you like this. The odds have come out. I saw these odds yesterday, and immediately I said, PropSwap. Offensive Rookie of the Year. These guys aren't even drafted yet, but you can go out and buy the ticket right now for Jamar Chase at 12-1, Kyle Pitts 15-2. And if those guys by halfway through the season are the clear favorite for a Rookie of the Year, you would get the best odds in the country if you buy that ticket now. You can then post that ticket at PropSwap and sell it to somebody else. So someone else would say, wait a second, you have Jamar Chase at 12-1 odds? He's only 2-1 right now. Yeah, but I got it for 12-1. Do you want to buy this ticket from me? Put it on PropSwap and watch the money roll in. I'd buy tickets for all these guys. Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, Zach Wilson, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, 14-1. PropSwap. It's the only place you can do this. That's it. Simple to do. Go to PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. 3:45, 10 minutes till Sports Bash Cash code word. I'm Mike Gill. What's going on? Keith Smith, great job as always. I think Keith is one of the smarter guys who cover the league. He's so good. He does a lot on the cap, too. So we'll talk to him throughout the season, playoffs, little off-season stuff. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Free mobile app. Download the free mobile app. You can personalize your alerts now. In other words, you can say, I just want Phillies alerts. I'm a Phillies fan. I only want Phillies. I only want Eagles. I only want Sixers. I only want Flyers. I only want high school sports. Or I want them all. And we can send them right to your phone. We'll alert you when anything happens. Big breaking news. Just like yesterday when Mickey Moniak got called up to the Phillies. Phillies alerts first to know. With the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Download it on your phone. There's so much you can do with it. You ever actually look at the app and just like kind of play around on that thing? It's got an alarm on it you can use for waking you up in the morning. You can listen to the show. You can actually message the studio. Yeah, there's a section on there that you just hit message, and you can message us through the app. You can enter the Sports Bash Cash code words. You can actually call us from there. As I mentioned, there's an alarm. There's a video section. There's so many different things on the app. It's one of the best apps that I've seen for a radio station. I got to be honest with you. A lot of these radio stations have apps that are corporately run. They're like all through, we have our own individual app for our station only. So get the app. It's got all of the stuff that's on our website, 973ESPN.com and more. It's a click away. Download it wherever you get your apps. It's powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. And don't forget, you can watch the show live. I am really enjoying watching the people in the chat. They have like their own little show going on over there, a lot of these people. This might be my favorite comment of the day, though, from Kyle Dubray. He says, Mike Gill is the man. Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate that. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Mike, how much money did you win with your bet on prop swap? I didn't prop swap Embiid last night. I bought it myself. You know what I should have? I should have bought the Embiid ticket and then sold it when he had 28 points at the half. You want this ticket? Anybody? Mike, do you consider the Sixers a super team? No, I would not consider the Sixers a super team. I would say Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons are both. Joel Embiid is a superstar. They don't have another superstar. They have two all-star level players, Simmons and Harris. I know Harris hasn't made an all-star, but he's an all-star level player. So, no, I would not consider the Sixers a super team. They were, like, right on the verge of that when they had Butler. They had Simmons, Butler. They had, like, three all-star level players. They were eerily getting close to the Detroit Pistons. They didn't have – the problem was they didn't have Ben Wallace. They didn't have that type of player. They didn't have the jump shooter that could hit the big clutch shot like Chauncey Billups or Richard Hamilton. Those guys were, big time. This is an interesting question. Do you guys think that we will ever see NFL games in other countries? They're already scheduled. They're playing in Mexico, I think, next year. I think they're going back to London. Those games are already scheduled. They're playing, I know Atlanta's playing someone in London, I think, next year. So, yeah, those games are back. They're not getting rid of those things. All right, what else we got over here? A lot of stuff coming in on the live video chat. This one's interesting. Maka says, if less teams make the playoffs and or we make home team advantage greater, we cure the in-season malaise. We brought that up with Jay Fitz earlier. I would like to know, though, how do you make the home team advantage greater? Some of the things they talked about trying to do in the bubble last year, giving them extra possessions or something crazy like that. I don't like that angle. Here's the problem. Like Jason Fitz said it's an eye-opening thing, and it sucks. The culture we live in is such a championship or bust culture. That's all we care about. We don't care that our team is the 4th seed. If they're the 4th seed, they have no shot to win. We don't care. Or anything they do in the regular season. We don't care. It has gotten to the point, if you don't win the championship, we want to lose. I laugh because the Flyers, Durso wrote his 5 takeaways and had them up on the Facebook. People are commenting all over it. And one of the comments is, I don't care. I want them to lose. It's like you get to a certain point of the season where you realize your team can no longer win the championship. And the initial reaction is automatically, I want to lose. Right? It's immediate. As soon as you believe that your team, soon as you give up hope that your team has no shot to win a title, you immediately reverse course and say, I want to lose. You know, back in the day, you didn't care. You wanted to keep winning. You wanted to just play to win. It's different. Steve is commenting on the Facebook. He says, how the hell does this team go from contenders last year to bottom feeders this year? Yes, I know there's been some personnel changes, but the 3 or 4 guys that left weren't core players. Something's gone horribly wrong with this team behind the scenes, and I sure hope they can fix it. People can point out this guy or that guy has to go, or the coach is the problem, or the refs are against us, but something is horribly wrong at the core of this team. And if you say I'm not a fan or I should accept what's going on and keep believing and support this team no matter what, then you're a moron and have no idea about hockey. But most people, Steve, are at the point where they say, look, this team stinks. I just want them to lose. They don't want to find the solution. The solution has always just become now, I just want to lose. Right? Jay Fitz is right. The culture we have created is if you don't win the championship, I want you to lose. Now, sure, the team that doesn't win the championship, you're on board for that team that's on the long journey that has the ride. If you come up just short, that's different. But it's that realization of, the Flyers aren't good enough. I don't want you to win anymore. Like Carter Hart's playing tonight. And some people will say, why are you even playing Carter Hart? Just lose. There's a fine line between development, playing to get better. You can't just tank all the time. Our society has just turned into, if I'm not good enough, I just quit. Right? The college portal. I'm not good enough to play at this college, I'll just transfer to another college. I'm not good enough to play here, I'll just transfer to a place I can play. My team's not good enough, we'll just lose. That's acceptable. It's a bad precedent that we've set, and we've created this, the fans. You know, I said, I like the process. I hated the process. What does that mean? I don't like that I support losing because I think it's the best way to get a player of Joel Embiid's. The Sixers weren't getting Joel Embiid unless they did what they did. If the Sixers didn't decide to strip it all down, they would have won 38 to 45 games. Andre Iguodala, Thad Young, Evan Turner, Spencer Hall, they would have won 40 games with that team. What would that have accomplished? We have this fight all the time, the process against the anti-processors. The process people said, I don't like it. Well, a lot of them. I said, I don't like what they're doing, but at least I'd rather have Joel Embiid now than be still trying to figure out what to do with Andre Iguodala and Thaddeus Young. But I also don't like that this is the recourse. Sixers aren't good enough. Let's just lose. Eagles aren't good enough. You know, when you're playing a football game and you're 4-10, I don't want to win next week. Let's just lose. Let's get a better draft pick. It's a society that has basically embraced losing. That's what it comes down to. I know there's a bunch of get off my lawners out there. I don't embrace losing. I don't like the process. You're the outlier. We get it. You have chosen not to evolve. Others have evolved, and the evolution is more knowledge, and the knowledge is getting better draft choices gives me a better chance of being a better team. It doesn't guarantee it, but it means I have a better percentage of finding a better player. It's not good, but this is what it's become. Either win the championship or lose. There is no in between. Sports Bash is brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan, now open on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot, online, mattblattnissan.com. Hey, I got a Sports Bash cash code word for you. It's worth up to $1,000. If you're listening and you don't enter this code word, I don't understand you. This is a chance for $1,000 right now.
Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000. Enter the code words every day at 973ESPN.com or with the free mobile app. The more codes you enter, the more chances you have to win up to $10,000. Here's the Sports Bash Cash code word.
Slipper. 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 For it now on our website, 973ESPN.com, or use the free mobile app. Sports Bash Cash is brought to you by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union for all your lending needs. Get the next Sports Bash Cash code word at 455.
It's Sports Bash Cash 10 times a day. Every weekday at 55 after each hour from 9:55 a.m. to 6:55 p.m. Listen all day for your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Go to PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. Andrew DiCecco is in the house talking NFL draft. If you have questions for Andrew, draft conversation, Eagles conversation, football conversation, text 609-403-0973 or hit us up in the live video chat, and we will tackle some of your draft questions for Andrew DiCecco. As, of course, Football at 4 powered by Inside the Birds. Their new podcast dropped this morning. You can listen to that every Monday and Thursday at 6 a.m. as he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. We are now 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. What's going on, Andrew?
Hey, doing well, Mike. How's it going?
2 weeks away. It's almost like it feels like Christmas. It's like, oh my God, I can't wait. But there's so much that's still kind of dissect and break down. What, the Eagles situation at number 12, I think a lot of people have kind of, I don't want to say a lot of people. I think it's been mixed bag all over the place. Corner, wide receiver. I think I see a little bit of edge rush in there, not too much. But what do you, when you, I know you don't watch or look at a lot of mock drafts here, but in your mind, what is the outside notion of what the Eagles need to do the most at that spot? An offensive player or a defensive player?
Well, when they were at 6, it was all about the offense. But I think now, sitting there at 12, there's always the outside chance that a Jalen Waddle falls to 12, which I think would certainly appease the fan base, getting that speed, another speed receiver, another weapon for Jalen Hurts in the offense. But I think the best player that's going to be available at 12 is going to be J.C. Horn, who many feel, and I'm one of them, that he is the top corner in this draft now that Caleb Farley is going through that back procedure. So I think that's a great that's no small consolation, dropping down to 12 and getting the top play corner.
Yeah. So I asked a question today on Twitter that got some interesting answers to. And the question I asked is, a lot of people did not like the trade to number 12. I think a lot of those people they don't like Howie. They don't like the move to 12. They thought 6. So if you hated the Eagles trade from 6 to 12, what player would make you change your mind? If they land this guy, you'll now like the trade. So if there's a guy at 12 that they get that you think they can get that would be the surprise guy, which guy is that? That you think that, man, I didn't want them to move to 12, but if they get him, I will now say this was a good trade.
Well, I think if you're a fan, you're looking at the scenarios. If you're able to get a Jalen Waddle at 12, who is a top 10 talent, I mean, some feel that he's better than Devontae Smith and will have a better pro career than Devontae Smith. I think if you can get him at 12, I think that's a victory. I think if you get a J.C. Horn at 12, that's a victory because I do like his upside. And I think that he offers probably the most upside out of the top 3 corners. Not necessarily the most ready or refined to go right yet, but I think that he offers immense upside. So I think if you get one of those 2 players, a Rashawn Slater, kind of won't really, he's not going to garner a lot of headlines because he's an offensive lineman, but he would be a great addition there as well.
All right. So some questions are coming in from our listeners already for Andrew for the draft. Mike from Dover, Delaware. What's going on in Delaware there, Mike? He wants to know why Caleb Farley is getting no love or mention. He says, I feel like everything I hear, no mention of him. It looks like he has the size. So why is it no Farley?
Well, Mike, you're right that he does have the size, the athleticism, the ball skills. But, I mean, there's always that injury concern, right? I mean, he's going through a back procedure now. He had the back issue earlier in his career. He dealt with that all season, missed 2 games with that, had a non-contact ACL injury in 2017. So, I mean, looking at the history, Jeffrey Simmons is the most recent one I can think of that was able to kind of bounce back and overcome that. But I mean, look at the Sidney Jones situation. I think that teams are going to be more inclined to shy away from that when you're dealing with, you're trying to fork over a premier draft capital. I think that you want somebody with a clean bill of health that's doesn't have those medical red flags. I mean, the talent is undeniable, but I think when you're looking at that part of the draft, you're going to go with someone like a Pat Surtain or a J.C. Horn, who is healthy and both offer varying degrees of upside. I mean, unfortunately for him, he's going to probably tumble a little bit. I don't know that it'll be entirely out of the first round, but I mean, that's kind of why he's become sort of an afterthought when mentioning the corners.
Is he a guy you would, if he's tumbling, you would trade back into the first round to get?
Oh, absolutely. I would.
All right, let's get some questions here. Wants to know who's the top. Okay, this is interesting. Who's your top edge rusher? Because at 12, is an edge rusher in play? And if so, let's kind of break down. A lot of people haven't been talking a lot about these edge rushers. So who's your guy there?
I got asked this question in my mailbag, and it's really interesting because this year is one of the first years that I can recall that there's no clear-cut number one edge rusher in this class. Now, there's guys that I like, and the most obvious one is going to be Gregory Rousseau from Miami, but I'm not inclined to say that he's the top guy because he also has certain areas of his game. He only has the 1 year production, but he also needs to add a lot of weight and size and develop his play strength and really develop a pass rush arsenal. So I don't know that. I mean, you're drafting him based on projection. I don't know that he's really shown. He still has to answer a lot of questions, is what I'm getting at. So I look at Kwity Paye from Michigan, and I also look at Jason Owe from Penn State. Those are the two guys that I look at. They're two entirely different players, but I mean, based on the feedback and everything we've seen from Jason Owe, I think that he's going to get some consideration for that top edge rusher.
Now, would you agree, Andrew, that the Eagles need to get a edge rusher in this, not only in this draft, but in the top portion of in those first 3 rounds?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. And I think that when you're looking at 12, my gut's telling me that they're going to look at Kwity Paye. He's going to get some heavy consideration there at 12. Would that be the best investment, best use of resource? No, I don't think so, because Kwity Paye, I don't know, based on his makeup and his skill set, I don't know that he'll ever be a consistent double-digit sack guy at the next level. I do think that you need to address that in the top 3 rounds, but I also think at 70, you're going to have your choice of pass rushers from Pitt, who I really like, Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones, who I also think offer varying degrees of upside. So there's going to be options there. I think at 12, when you're looking at what they have, what they're probably going to have to work with, I mean, you're going to come away with a top corner. I mean, or even a receiver like Jalen Waddle that could happen. So, I mean, who knows? I think those would be the best use of resources when you're looking at the 12th pick.
Okay, some more questions coming in. This one is from one of our viewers, ISPR, who wants to know what grade or round does Andrew have on linebacker Zaven Collins? I think he's the kid from Tulsa?
Yeah, he's a Tulsa guy. He's a very interesting player, and I appreciate this question because I was really high on him early in the process. He's kind of become something of an afterthought throughout this whole pre-draft process. He, to me, strikes me. I have him in the second round, by the way, late second round pick. But I think he's more of a 3-4 fit. And for as big as he really is underwhelming as far as just his overall physicality, block shedding, and things of that nature. He moves really well for his size, and he's very fluid and he can move sideline to sideline and everything. But his lack of physicality was really, really concerning to me and apparent when I watched him on film. You don't usually see somebody that size kind of get walled off by linemen as regularly as he does.
All right, here's a question from Jalen. He wants to know, is there any chance that, I'll do my best here, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah could be there at the end of the first round, early second? And if he is, should the Eagles try to move up to snag him? I like how people, Andrew, are starting to already think about the guys who are falling to get back because they have that second, third round pick now. Yeah. And that gives them the ammunition. So they seem like at 37 and 2 third-round picks, they seem like a definitive candidate to move back up.
Yeah, I actually see him as more of a 20 to 25 going in that range. So if he does if he's still there and the Eagles really like him and they have a fit for him, and Jonathan Gannon envisions a defense where he's going to be a prominent player like Darius Leonard was for the Colts, and he saw the impact that a linebacker like that can have. then yeah, I can certainly see that. He's not going to be available in the second round. I highly doubt it.
No, is that a player, though, that you would recommend trading back up if he's there? Like, hey, this guy's there at 27. Let's move up 10 spots because we really want him. Not sure we can get him at 37.
Well, and I mean, if you're looking at it like that, I would say why not just hang tight at 37 and take Baron Browning from Ohio State?
Okay, so comparable.
Yeah, I think so. As far as skill set, I mean, maybe not quite he's not quite the athlete, but Browning's not quite the athlete. But I think that he does have comparable skill set, and he has the length, and he's going to be a plug and play starter. He's one of the few players that I saw his transition to the NFL being pretty seamless.
All right, now here's a question that wants to know. I don't think this is possible, but let's see what you say. Any chance the Eagles could get back in and get both Parsons and Horn? You see Horn dropping to where a team would have to trade and say, look, he's at 18, he's at 19. I mean, Parsons, I don't think they take at 12, though, either.
No, I don't think they take Parsons at 12.
Is he on the board at 12?
I mean, I think he could get some. It wouldn't surprise me if Denver were to take him at 9. Maybe Giants at 11.
All right. Here's a question, Andrew, that Bill wants to know. He says, if the Eagles pass on that wide receiver at 12, is there one that you would target at 37, or would you wait until the third round and get one?
It's a good question, Bill. And yeah, I'm looking at Terrace Marshall, the wide receiver from LSU, at 37. And should the Eagles wait until the third round, it's going to be a little bit of a stretch. With Diami Brown, the wide receiver from UNC, could still be available. Dwayne Eskridge, he's a little bit smaller. He's about 5'9", but he's incredibly fast. Gives you that vertical element. The receiver from Western Michigan, of course, he's going to be he's going to go right around 70, I would say, in that range. So, I mean, there's going to be plenty of options there. I don't necessarily know that it's not the end of the world necessarily if they don't get like a Jalen Waddle there at 12. Bateman could be there at 37. It depends on what the Eagles are really looking for. I think they could use an upgrade in the slot from Greg Ward. They need a more dynamic player there. And I also think that they need another outside X receiver.
Yeah.
They need to add some size there because you don't want to go into this offseason banking on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside making that leap again, because we saw what that can do if you kind of put all your eggs into that basket.
No, but do you think which of the receivers, even if there's multiple guys, that you think would be the best complement to what Rieger does?
At 37?
Just in general, like which of the, okay, even if you're taking one at 12 of the guys available, who fits better with what Rieger does? Is that Smith? Is that Waddle? Do you say, you know what, Bateman would be a great pairing with Rieger? I mean, Rieger's an interesting guy, a tough guy to kind of evaluate. He didn't play all that much last year.
Yeah. Well, based on the role that they envision for him and what we can kind of ascertain from when they drafted him, he's a speed guy and they use him in a multitude of ways. Well, I think that a guy like Bateman would be an ideal pairing with him, and he could be available there at 37. So that to me would be the best fit. And then Marshall, the wide receiver from LSU, would be the runner up there if Bateman shouldn't be available.
Kyle Dubray is watching on YouTube, and he wants to know, Andrew, what do you think of cornerback Tyson Campbell? I think he's the Georgia kid, correct?
Yeah. I like him quite a bit. Now, when you're comparing him to Eric Stokes is more NFL ready. I think that Tyson Campbell, everything that he's gotten, all the production that he's had in college has been just based on his innate athleticism. He hasn't really, he's not refined, nor is he ready to step in right away. I think if you get him into a proper, surround him with the proper coaching staff and support system, he has a much higher upside than Eric Stokes. But what the Eagles need right now, I don't know that he would be the pick. I think if they had their choice, I think the Eagles would be better served taking Eric Stokes, because he's no slouch either, but he's also ready to step in there and be that complement to Darius Slay.
All right, this is an interesting one from Frank. What quarterback does Andrew think has the best chance to fall to number 12, and would the Eagles take him if he was there?
What corner?
Quarter.
You said quarter?
Passer, quarter.
Oh, quarter. Man,
yes. This would be the
Mac
fifth.
Jones should be.
This would be the fifth of the 5, right?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that it would be Mac Jones if there is one available at 12. But I mean,
so you're not buying this.
You're talking about the fifth quarterback in a class where there's question marks surrounding many of them outside of Trevor Lawrence. When you have the possibility of adding a top tier corner, an impact wide receiver, a versatile offensive lineman, that just wouldn't make any sense to me at all. I think they'd be better served drafting a developmental quarterback in the mid rounds. One of the questions earlier this week was Kellen Mond. Kellen Mond would be the perfect developmental player to add to kind of as like an upside quarterback to back up Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. Now I agree with you. I'm not taking a quarterback at 12 or at 6. I wasn't either, but that's an interesting question. Now I guess that means, Frank, that you're not buying Mac Jones at 3 still.
No, I'm not. I think it's Justin Fields
at 3. Okay, which is interesting. That's a whole interesting scenario too. I heard Louis Riddick talking about this today, and you probably can attest to this. You've covered the draft. You do a lot of, you obviously do a lot of draft coverage, and over the years, you've gone to the Shrine Bowls and the Senior Bowls and all that kind of stuff. And he was talking about how the information this year is getting out a lot slower. In other words, teams aren't as prepared at this point than they have been in the past.
Yeah, and it's funny. I had this conversation yesterday with someone, and this year is unlike. Well, last year was kind of was another curveball as well. But this year it's really teams have to go off of their scouting and their tape, because there's no combine and there's no these pro day numbers. Listen, the pro day numbers that are coming in for all those who have ever been to a pro day, there's not all these guys aren't running 4.3s, right? I mean, like that's just you have to take all that at face value. That doesn't happen as frequently as many are led to believe this offseason. I mean, I've never seen so many guys run 4.3s during a pre-draft cycle. So I mean, yeah, the information is getting out relatively slower, and it's kind of this is a year where you really need to rely on your scouting department and what you've seen on film versus these numbers that are kind of just being thrown out there, and these testing numbers that makes everybody seem like they're by what these numbers are, you think there's 40 guys that are slated to go in the first round.
Yeah, and we got so many questions. Let's try to do a couple rapid fires. We're coming short on time. Nico Collins, do you think the Eagles? He's interesting. He's like a tank. That guy, 6'4". Nico Collins, what do you think?
I like him. I think he fits what the Eagles need from a size perspective. And I also do think that he'll be available at 70. So, yeah, I mean, I think he could step in and be productive. I don't know that it would be right away, though.
All right. This is an interesting follow-up question here from another gentleman who heard the quarterback conversation. Is if a quarterback falls to 12, should the Eagles trade out of that pick? Give someone else who wants a quarterback, say, hey, take that pick. Most likely the Pats.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also depends on who's within striking distance for the Eagles. If they think they can drop down a couple of spots and still get their guy, then yeah, why not?
Let's get one more in here on a wide receiver. Everybody wants to ask about wide receivers. Taylon Wallace, Oklahoma State. What grade does Andrew give him?
A late second round grade on him. And he was another guy that would be a great fit, and tremendous body control, good catch radius. He's got speed. He's polished. He's a good route runner. I think that there's a lot to like with him. He's going to be, I don't know that he'll be available at 70. So if the Eagles wanted to get him, they'd have to get him in the second round.
All right. There you go. Andrew answering your draft questions. This has been fun. A lot of people getting involved.
No, it is. It is. I really appreciate all the questions.
Yeah. This is almost like our own little version of Ask ITB Football at 4. Mike and Andrew doing draft ITB live.
Yeah, man. All right. I really appreciate everybody. There's some great questions there.
Yeah, good stuff. Andrew's back on Tuesday with another edition of Football at 4. Draft is 14 days away. We'll get more into it. We'll mix it up more. Andrew DiCecco here on the Sport Bash. Thanks, pal.
Have a great weekend, Mike.
You do the same. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Frank, you're welcome. Frank says, thank you, Andrew and Mike. No, he said, thank you, Andrew. And then he threw me in there. Thank you. I'm hosting this thing, Frank. It's my idea. That's all good, man. We love it. We love talking draft. Andrew is excellent on the draft. Excellent on the draft. If you missed our conversation on the draft yesterday with Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports, really good. Really good. Check that out on our YouTube channel. I see a lot of people in the chat, live video. If you're in the live video, stick around because longtime NBA insider from Sirius XM NBA Radio, Mitch Lawrence. He's never afraid to give an opinion, and you're going to hear his opinion on last night's game coming up next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. They were tied. The number 1 seed was on the line last night, but one team showed up, the other didn't. Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio. I definitely want to hear his thoughts on what did we learn from that game, and what that means for the league. That, Mitch, the Nets decided that, you know what, Philly, if you want home court advantage in the playoffs, you go ahead and take it. What's the message there?
It's a bad message. The Nets have wasted a perfectly good regular season. Well, it's not perfectly good. It's a flawed regular season, as we know. It's going to be a war of attrition with all these crazy injuries. So there's a problem there for the league. But the Nets are like the Clippers last year. Remember, the Clippers went into the playoffs. They had played maybe 10, 12 games with everybody together, their top 7 or 8 players. I don't know if you remember that. And then they actually, and then what happened? When things got really tough in the playoffs, and they had to kind of count on each other, they had nothing to fall back on in terms of a regular season experience. That's why it's so important. That's why the regular season, although everybody just basically says regular season doesn't care, who cares about it? That's where you work out things that's going to help you in the playoffs get through hard times. I remember talking to, when the Warriors were winning titles a few years ago, talking to Andre Iguodala, and he was like, you learn so much on your way to a title that you learn, first of all, what you can't get away with in the future, how you can't cut corners, but you also have the knowledge of, all right, this is what's going to get us through in tight spots in the playoffs. When you're under duress, when there's a lot of problems that you have to figure out on the court, you guys figure them out during the regular season. You don't all of a sudden show up to the playoffs and say, we're going to start figuring things out. So the Clippers didn't do that last year. Now the Nets this year, can they figure them out any better? Well, it's a differently constructed team. But the problem is that you've got a guy like Kevin Durant who's in and out of the lineup. You can't count on him because of his health, because of these leg injuries he's had. We know that Harden's bombed in the playoffs before, and Kyrie Irving, who the heck knows where his head's going to be in the playoffs. So it looks like right now, everybody says, well, the Nets have more than Philly. That might be. I got to give the edge to Philly just in terms of, I think they've been together a little bit longer now. If they meet, Mike, obviously it's going to be the conference final, so the Nets will have figured out 2 rounds, including, let's say, beating Milwaukee if it's a 2-3 situation. But I can't tell you right now that I'm definitely thinking the Nets are going to beat the Sixers.
Right. Well, and I guess you watched that game last night and you wonder, all right, did we learn anything? Did we get something from that game? Joel Embiid has almost 40 points. I mean, did we say, hey, I don't care that you didn't have Durant and Harden, you can't stop Embiid?
They probably can't stop Embiid because DeAndre Jordan's not the answer. They came up short for Andre Drummond. They don't have the size to stop Embiid. So they probably can't stop Embiid, who, by the way, has missed. He's only played about 66% of the Sixers games this year. He's out of the MVP discussion, right? Because he's not going to play enough games. So who knows what his Can you count on him in the playoffs? He's basically been unreliable, too, for the Sixers. As he and Ben Simmons, the one thing is, he and Ben Simmons have never gotten past the second round, and usually they've bombed in the second round. So, it's like you got one team that hasn't been together that long. You got another team that, all right, these guys have been together, the main 2 guys, but what have they done?
Well,
so it's basically a jump ball.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, Mitch. They haven't got out of the second round, but a lot of guys, they lose. This is a different Joel Embiid. I've watched him every night. This is a different guy. You're right. We'll see. He's got to stay healthy, but he's definitely a different guy than we've seen. He's in much better shape. He's definitely in the fourth quarter been different, but is it their time? Like, do you watch that Sixer team and say, this is their time finally?
No, I'm not saying it's anybody's time. It's nobody's
Maybe
time.
Not to win it, Maybe not to win the whole thing, but to get out of that second round, I guess I should say.
Better get out of the second round. What are you going up against in the Eastern Conference? Right now, who's the 4th place team in the East that they would play in the second round? Philadelphia.
Right, it's Atlanta.
They can't beat Atlanta. They should maul Atlanta.
Right. No, Atlanta or Boston right now is in that 4-5.
If they're any good, they'll maul Atlanta in 4 games. If they go to 6 games with Atlanta, that's a problem. That is a big problem.
So then would you agree, and I said this yesterday, I want to see if you agree, that the 1 seed is obviously more important to Philly than it is Brooklyn?
Yes, I probably think so, though. Everybody's assuming that, the Nets could go into Philadelphia and win a game. How do we don't know anything about the Nets. They have no playoff. They have no resume. They have no record. It's a bunch of big-name players who are going to be, basically joining forces together for the first time really in the playoffs. I mean, that's not the way the NBA works traditionally. I mean, you got to have some sort of a track record. Even when LeBron went to Miami that first year, they had a lot of growing pains, but they were on the court together. He, Wade, Bosh, right? I mean, that's the way it works.
Well, and you remember that
Heat team, even on the court to have any growing pains.
You remember that Heat team too, Mitch? They put that team together. They didn't win their first season. It took them a season before they finally won.
And they lost to a team, Dallas. Jason Kidd was basically done. He was their second best player. It was basically a one-man show with Nowitzki, and they couldn't take him out, and they had a 2-1 series lead. And LeBron imploded in fourth quarters of games 4, 5, 6 after they had a 2-1 lead, right? I mean, he couldn't get the job done. So, yeah, I mean, look, I don't know what the thing about the Nets is it's just a big mystery. And here's the other thing. Steve Nash, never been a coach, and he's never been a coach. He's never been a playoff coach. Now, Doc Rivers, he got fired last year because he blew that series along with the Clippers. That's the second time that Doc Rivers had blown a series when he was up 3-1. It's only been done 13 times in the history of the league. He's got 2 on his resume. Does he have more experience than Steve Nash? Steve Nash has as many playoff games as I have coaching. Come on.
Mitch Lawrence, Sirius XM NBA Radio, who has 0 playoff games coach, but he has covered a ton of NBA. Yes, 1 million playoff games and in regular season games. Does the NBA have a problem here with what happened last night, or is it just, hey, this is what it is, deal with it?
The NBA has a problem. I don't know if they have a problem with it. We all know there's a problem.
Oh, that's interesting.
We all know that the regular season has been totally devalued. And don't get me started on these ridiculous play-in games. That just makes the regular season even more like doesn't mean anything. The league should have a big problem when you have a showdown and Kevin Durant doesn't play. Now I understand, they don't want to play him on the back end of the back-to-back in the Minnesota game because of the stuff going on out in Minneapolis. The life and death things going on in the world, Mike. They had to move that game, so all of a sudden it became a back-to-back. Now Durant, we knew Durant wasn't going to play. Basically, he's not going to play. But the league should have any time. Look.
So why not play him? Why not sit him in that game? Why not sit him in that game?
That's a great call. I think because the Nets figured, you know what? We don't have Harden. Crazy Kyrie's home. We got to win this game to keep pace with Philadelphia. Let's take care of this one first. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm not on the Zoom calls with Steve Nash. I'm not on the Zoom calls with anybody. Do you know that people on the Zoom calls with Kyrie Irving have still not asked him why he missed all those games about a couple of months ago? He's been out 2 different times this year because of quote-unquote personal family reasons. Nobody asked him a question about what's going on.
I'll tell you, this
New York media at work.
This East is compelling. I mean, you got this Brooklyn team that's a mystery. You got this Philly team that it feels like people aren't buying into, but they have an MVP candidate. I know he hasn't played a lot of games, although if he plays the rest of the way, he would have played 50 games in a 72-game season. Would you not consider him for MVP if he played 50 of 72?
I don't know what the math is on that. It's more than like 8 or 9 games that, to me, a guy's got to play basically 85, 90% of the games. Really? Come on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess
you can't. Now, there is a precedent. Bill Walton, back in an 82-game season 100 years ago in like 77, he only played like 59 games. He was the league MVP. Don't ask me why the voters, did it that way. But recently, more recent decades, it's been you got to play close to 82 games. Now, the problem now is who plays 82 games?
Right, and you got
82. Here's what 82 games is for people: a major inconvenience. Even though it's a major inconvenience.
Well, everybody's giving Nikola Jokic the MVP, but that team, I mean, if you're looking at the standings, it's typically not. They're going to be a 4 seed.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Now, here's the thing you got to worry about with Jokic. First of all, are they going to improve any now that Jamal Murray is done, and that means their championship hopes are done? And I never really gave him. I was up there. I thought they were long shots at best.
Agree.
But Murray's their best perimeter offensive player. Nobody else there can do what he does. I don't care if they sign Austin Rivers. I don't care if they sign Doc Rivers. He ain't going to get. You can't replace Jamal Murray on that team. Now, their record against teams with winning records is 16-11. Donovan Mitchell's got a better case. The Jazz's record is 23-9. They're 14 games over 500 against teams with winning records. And Chris Paul, if you want him for an MVP candidate, they're 12 games over 500, 19-7 against teams with winning records. And both those teams, and this is what I usually go by, you want to be an MVP? let's get your team into the number 1 or number 2 slot.
Yeah.
Number 1 or number 2 seeds. Now, back in 2016, 2017, we know Russell Westbrook, okay, was the MVP on a 6-seeded team. That was about, I think they were 47-35. But he got it because it was a historical season. He had done something. He had averaged a triple-double. Hadn't been done since Oscar Robertson. I mean, Nikola Jokic is having a great year. Don't get me wrong. He ain't doing anything historical, and his team's in 4th. And guess what? Who knows if they're going to be able to hold on to 4th. I'm not so sold on him. I know somebody's got to win the award.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, it's weird. By the way, Westbrook's averaging a triple-double again, and nobody even knows or nobody even cares. The weird part is the 1 seed, Brooklyn, doesn't have a candidate because no one's been on the court. You're going to give it to Donovan Mitchell. You're giving it to a Phoenix player. Embiid, by the way, my trusty producer says he has played, if he plays 50 of 72, that would be 70% of the games. It's equivalent of 57 of the 82.
Yeah. That ain't good enough for me.
Jeez.
Sorry.
All right.
Sorry. Hey. I mean, look. You want to be great. You got to be there every night, basically.
Yeah.
But you know what? You're talking to somebody who's. I mean, I used to fill out the bracket when it was, should I vote for Larry Bird or Magic Johnson?
Exactly.
Ago,
different times, man. I can't look. LeBron, give him credit. When he's not injured, he plays every night. He rarely says, I'm just not playing tonight.
Before he went down with that injury, I thought he was the MVP, slightly over Embiid, and I thought it was going to be I thought it was a 2-man race, and I thought, you know what, this is going to be a tremendous finish because LeBron is in a drive for 5 to tie Michael Jordan on MVPs. Remember, LeBron won 4 in 5 years, and he hasn't been heard from since. Year after year, it's been Giannis, it's been Harden, it's been Westbrook. It's driving LeBron nuts because he just he doesn't feel like he gets the respect, which is totally ridiculous. But I thought that was going to be a 2-man race. Now, he hasn't played enough games either.
No.
With this injury.
Nope.
So he's in the same boat as Embiid.
Speaking of,
I just hope that the guy who wins it, his team is in 1st or 2nd place in their respective. Now, I can't give it to Giannis. I mean, Giannis is, the thing is, like, I'm not.
He's hurt too.
On Giannis, but here's the deal, bro. That's the thing too. He's missed 8 out of the last 13 games, and nobody knows. It's amazing. They asked Mike Budenholzer on one of them Zoom calls, "What's the time? Do you have a timetable for Giannis's return?" No, was the answer. How scary is that if you're a Bucks fan? If you're the Milwaukee Bucks, if you're Mike Budenholzer, who's basically your coaching career might be riding on this guy's coat. He's got to be healthy for you to go deep. Otherwise, you're probably going to get fired. That's a big problem. But the other thing about Giannis, there hasn't been a guy who's won 3 in a row since Larry Bird. Okay? 3 people have won 3 MVPs in a row. Bill Russell, Will Chamberlain, Larry Bird. Giannis Antetokounmpo, I'm sorry, he's not on that level. Sorry.
They're the 3 seed currently. The Bucks. Are we not talking enough about them?
I'm not buying them. I'm not buying them. Well, the big problem is Giannis and his knee. I mean, look, he comes back. It's going to get better with him playing on it. We don't really know what's wrong with it, except it's the same knee, I believe, that was messed up last year. Late in the year in March, he had a problem, remember? I think they were on the West Coast. And then in the bubble, it resurfaced, and that he was a diminished Giannis Antetokounmpo. He had problems in the playoffs again when they imploded and they went backwards. They got knocked out in the second round and make it to the conference finals. So I'm assuming when he comes back, he will be diminished. He won't be 100%, and I'm not buying Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton coming to the rescue. They're just not good enough.
Mitch Lawrence, Sirius XM, NBA Radio. By the way, so you're saying you got to be 1st or 2nd. That's Philly, Brooklyn, Utah,
usually.
Suns. That's it. That's all you got. Those are the 4.
Right.
So Embiid's got to win.
Well, I tell you what, you sound like a publicist. Did you grow up in Cameroon too?
Well, I mean, come on. The Brooklyn Nets last night, and everybody, he had 30 at half last night.
Oh, I know. I watched the game. It was absolutely, there's some of these games where Embiid it's just bully ball, which is great to watch because if you remember the NBA and you remember sometimes it was bully ball back in the past when you had, when you had multiple guys like Embiid, roaming the courts, back in the day when centers meant something. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you get tired of watching little guys just fling up 3-point shots.
Yep, I agree. Well,
it's like, remember what Shaq used to do to people? And it was all based on power. Shaq never went to people. I'd say to him, why don't you try a little jump hook? He'd look at me. He goes, I just want to slam it down people's throats.
Right.
I want to break the backboard. That's what you like about this guy.
we were talking about this in the first hour. Somebody asked me about Embiid or is Embiid on Shaq's level? And I was thinking to myself, how is Shaq playing in today's game?
Huh?
How is
Shaq would kill people today?
Right, but nobody plays like that. Nobody plays like that.
Nobody has. Well, I'd like to say, and I'm saying it, Embiid's power, but a lot of the stuff that Embiid did last night is, long distance shots and mid range shots. Shaq today would kill people if they want to get him the ball. They might tell Shaq, "We can't get you the ball because we need a 3-point shot."
Right.
But especially people think of Shaq as the old, overweight guy, didn't take care of himself. Go back on YouTube and watch his first few years in Atlanta. He was a gazelle.
Orlando.
He's running up and down the court. He's dunking on people. He's playing bully ball. It's all with power. And don't forget that little move he had where he turned with his elbows up high and he knocked your teeth out of, which they basically outlawed with this dislodgement rule. That's how great Shaq was. You're a great player. Like in Wilt's case, they widened the lane. In Kareem's case, they changed the defensive, rules, illegal defensive rules for Kareem. And with Shaq, there was this dislodgement rule because he was basically sending everybody to get root canal work.
All right, Philly, Brooklyn, Bucks. Anybody else in the East? Miami went to the finals last year. Are they done? Boston?
They're done. First of all, Victor Oladipo, he might not be back.
True.
That's a huge blow for them. They were depending on he being the number 2 guy to Jimmy Butler, but they've been a trend. You know what they are? They're a product of the bubble.
Yeah,
they're a product. They haven't done anything this year. They have really. I thought they'd be great this year. Nah, not even close. Boston, I can't count on Kemba Walker in a big spot. He has trouble getting a shot off. As you know, he's too small, and we saw that last year. And Tatum and Brown are these guys who are, everybody calls them superstars. They're really not. They don't pass the ball enough. There's not enough ball movement with that team. Marcus Smart, you know what you're going to get out of him. And they got no size, so I wouldn't even be scared about playing a Boston. I think Philly this year, they need if they play Boston, they need to just take care of Boston once and for all, right?
Yep, that would be.
I don't know if they can even match up, but
yeah.
you know what I'm saying. But
no, they could 4-5 right
Boston
now.
to do anything at all?
Yeah, they're 4-5 right now. If they beat Atlanta and then Philly won, they'd get round 2. And Boston would have a tough time defending Joel Embiid, I would imagine. They got no size.
He should average 35 points a game and play every night. He should get 35 and 20. He should.
Oh, boy.
Against Robert Williams and all those guys.
I look forward to these playoffs because last week we had some cool matchups. The standings have jumbled a bit, but we had Brooklyn, New York last week. They were matched up in round 1. You had Philly, Boston matched up in round 1. You had Bucks, Heat in round 1. But now the East is so jumbled. Those things keep moving, but those were some good ones. It should be interesting to see how Brooklyn puts this all together. And, of course, the NBA playoffs start. Well, I don't
know
if
they can. We'll see. Meanwhile, the Knicks, the Knicks are going to make the playoffs, and there's more buzz in New York about the Knicks than the Nets.
I'm glad you brought this up because somebody texted in earlier asking me if Doc Rivers should be coach of the year. And I said, you got to say Monty Williams, you got to go Quinn Snyder, and I said Thibodeau.
Oh, Thibodeau's going to – look, he's done a really good job. We all know he's got, what kind of talent do you want to call it? It ain't first-rate talent. He's got a bunch of guys who, they're playing hard. They play, but you knew that you were going to do that. That's the deal with Tom. You knew that they were going to play hard all the time, not necessarily play well. The talent was going to catch up with them at points. And their big problem in a lot of games is they can't close games because they just don't have them. Yeah. They don't have the talent to do it. But he would be in consideration. I don't know if he'll get it, but he'll probably be, third, fourth down there. You always have to go with guys who are, to me, coaching the top teams.
Who's got more buzz up there?
And the guys you mentioned.
Who's got more buzz up there, Nets or Knicks?
I'm telling you, the Knicks are the bigger story up here. The Nets are a big story because nobody ever plays. The Knicks are a huge story because the Knicks fan has finally seen that, if you hire a competent guy who knows what he's doing, especially in the East with this type of roster, you can maybe make, sixth place. We'll see where they finish, seventh, who knows. And this is the first time they'll be in the playoffs since 2013. So there's been the whole last 20, 25 years for the Knicks has been already 20 years, has been a disaster. So, Tom Thibodeau is a guy who'll probably put up a statue for him.
Mitch Lawrence at Mitch_Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA radio here on the Sports Bash as the NBA playoffs start to shape up. We're in the final stretch run, about 20, a little less than 20 games left for these teams before we get to the playoffs. Mitch, it's great to catch up, pal.
Mike, always a pleasure.
Always
Don't
good.
be a stranger.
I will not. We will be
All
talking
right.
again soon. Mitch Lawrence from SiriusXM NBA Radio, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And I obviously agree with the fact of this Nets team. I don't know what to expect once they get to the playoffs, but you got to put them right at the top. Now, I'm not trying to be Embiid's publicist here, but he just said it. You got to be in first or second place. That's why Jokic, to me, is an interesting candidate for MVP, that everybody wants to give him the MVP. I said, but they're in fourth place right now, and they might drop without Murray. All right, we got Rob Maadi at 5. He's got an interesting story. He interviewed Jacoby Brissett and asked him about Nick Sirianni. I got the details of that conversation with Rob Maadi from the Associated Press at 5 o'clock today on the Sports Bash. Don't go away. All right, coming up in the 5 o'clock hour, we're going to talk with Rob Maadi from the Associated Press. He had an interesting conversation with Jacoby Brissett about Nick Sirianni and what you can expect. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, download the free mobile app, and you can enter the Sports Bash Cash code word. It's worth $1,000. We have another code word coming up in 2 minutes from now. Plus, you can watch the show live. Now, watching the show live, you can do on a variety of platforms. People out there, they're listening on the radio. Say, how do I watch the show? Well, you can do it on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Those 3 platforms is where you can see the video. But you can simply go to the website, 973ESPN.com, and there's a link that says Watch the Sports Bash Live. Click on that, and it'll take you to the YouTube video. And then once you get that video, you can do whatever you want with it. You can watch it on your laptop. You can watch it on your phone. You can stream it to your television. You can basically sit there on the website and watch it. It's very easy to do. And the people who watch the show, you get a chance to see the guests, be a part of the live chat. We got a lot of chat questions that come in throughout the course of the day, like this one. Everybody makes the playoffs, Mike. It's about the dinero. More ticket sales, TV money. I care about every game nonetheless. But the Nets coach, not so much. You know, that's a point that the NBA has to deal with. They don't care, but unfortunately, it's something that they got to deal with. You're a fan. You get a ticket to a game. You want to go buy a ticket to go see LeBron James play. He's out. Forget LeBron. Let's say you want to go see Denver and Nikola Jokic decides he's not playing, and that's your favorite player. You only get to see them once a year. I talked to Mitch. I talked to Keith Smith about it earlier. No one seems to think that the NBA can do anything about this. All right. I'm very intrigued to hear what Rob Maadi has to say about his conversation with Jacoby Brissett. What does he think about Nick Sirianni? That's coming up on the other side. The Sports Bash is live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. This hour brought to you by PropSwap. Go to PropSwap.com and download the PropSwap app today and start making money. All right, 5 o'clock hour, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, you can watch the show live at 97.3ESPN.com. We've had some big numbers watching the show. We appreciate everybody out there who has been a part of that. Brought to you by Matt Blatt Kia. They want to get you approved today. Matt Blatt, 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. Rob Maadi from the Associated Press, who covers the Eagles and the Phillies and does it all. He is with me now on the stream and the Boardwalk Honda hotline, as you can see him on the live stream. And if you're listening on the radio, Rob and I will get into some interesting conversation on the Eagles. You know, it seems that, Rob, there's a new Eagles story that kind of gets thrown out there every 2 weeks or so. It's like, let's take another blast at the Eagles. But I want to get your opinion on this. You of all the guys, like, you're a very level-headed person, I feel, right?
I appreciate that, Mike. I try to be.
Would you describe yourself in that matter?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think I try to keep things on an even keel. You know, it's kind of like the athlete mentality. Never get too high, never get too low.
Well, so we hear about the dysfunction in the Eagles front office, and I don't doubt that there is some level of dysfunction. But my question for you, Rob, isn't that something that goes on in all teams in today's game? In other words, where we sit in sports, not just football, you have analytics against the football guy or the baseball guy, and one side of the building doesn't respect the other side's viewpoint, and you have this constant butting of heads. Does that not happen with the Phillies and their analytic department against the Scouts, the Eagles, and other teams, or is this just solely an Eagles problem?
No, I definitely don't think it's solely an Eagles problem, Mike. And you bring up a great point. I think it depends on the construction and the makeup of the front office and the coaching staff and the executives. So if you have, let's look at the Phillies, for example. If you had the current analytical department in there with old school guys like Larry Bowa as a manager, certainly they would butt heads. Gabe Kapler embraced it. Joe Girardi is a guy who knows how to balance both. When you look at it from the Eagles' perspective, based on that story by The Athletic, by Zach and Shield and Bo, and they did a great job breaking it down and evaluating, it looks like there are certain issues, and I can understand that. I don't think, like you said, that is exclusive, only a Philadelphia Eagles problem. But the Eagles do have a level of dysfunction, and that stems from there's a lot of distrust. And you and I have spoken a lot about what happened with Carson Wentz in that situation. And there are other players there, past and present, who will tell you that there's a level of distrust that they have with the organization, with the front office. And that's something that certainly isn't unique in sports, but is problematic.
There's no question. And look, the Eagles have been down this road before, Rob. They had total dysfunction. It was a mess, when Chip Kelly was here. 2 years later, they won a Super Bowl. So is it stuff that you just have to kind of endure and kind of figure out your way out of it? Or is this something that is perpetually happening because of who's in charge?
Well, that's a great question. And yeah, they had success. They were able to turn it around. Howie was the leader, the executive vice president of football operations, who put together a staff that won a Super Bowl, right? Who put together a roster that won a Super Bowl. However, as we look at that, is that the outlier now, that Super Bowl season? Is this really an organization that is a middle-of-the-road, average team that's going to potentially contend for the playoffs, but not necessarily be a Super Bowl contender? You look at the opportunities that Howie has had with now on his fourth head coach. That's something that most general managers don't get an opportunity to do. The draft issues that they've had, the draft problems are well documented, Mike. We've talked about that a lot. This is a time now where they got to start hitting and start executing on the draft picks. So that's part of the problem. So at some point, you do have to start holding the people in charge accountable. You can't just say, well, we won a Super Bowl, let's run it back. Or, well, we won a Super Bowl with these people in charge, let's see them do it again because they've done it. Yes, I understand giving him the benefit of the doubt, But at the same time, there has to be a fine line drawn. And when is accountability going to be something that Jeff Lurie holds Howie Roseman to beyond just the head coach or the quarterback or assistant coaches?
Rob, you have covered the Eagles for how long?
22 years now.
22 years. The entire Jeffrey Lurie era. Did you ever feel that Jeffrey Lurie was an issue?
Not as much as I'm starting to now. I always thought of Jeffrey Lurie, Mike, as a guy who wanted to win, was passionate about winning, who didn't have a problem with spending money, somebody who would go out there at all costs and try and bring in the talent. I lived through, as a fan, the Norman Brayman era, and I saw free agents walk out the door. I saw Reggie White leave. I saw other guys leave. So Jeffrey Lurie's the complete opposite. We know he wants to win. We know he wants to bring in talent. But what we have seen and the stories that are being reported and the information that I'm also receiving is that he's increasingly become more involved in the day-to-day operations of this football team. And that is never a good situation to be in as from an owner standpoint, because you got to hire football people and let them make those decisions. If Jeffrey Lurie is putting together a draft board and telling his guys to draft J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, that's a problem. That's an issue, and that's beyond. And now I know he's the owner. I know he signs the checks. I know he can do whatever he wants to do, but that's a problem for a football team.
Right, and I guess this is where the whole Roseman can't draft and he does a terrible job and he's got to go gets a little murky, because how much of that is Lurie overstepping his own general manager? And I want to get your question. You said 21 years. I have never heard the name Alex Halaby before. Is he akin to what Alex Rucker was doing with the Sixers and just having so much power and really not having a title that anybody knew anything about, but having more input than he should?
It's
I see that smirk on your face, by the way. You can't hide on this video.
I forgot you could see my reactions. I got to be careful here. I can't roll the eyes or anything like that, right? So it seems, based on the reporting of Bo and Zach in The Athletic, that he has kind of this power struggle has developed. And Alex Halaby and the analytics department, those are things that we certainly got to keep an eye on and we got to dig into. And I'm with you as far as how much does an analytical guy have power in an organization? Because I don't think information's a bad thing. Like, there are people, right, who'll sit back and tell you analytics is terrible, it's ruined the game, it's this and that. I think you need as much information as you can get. If it gives you any kind of edge, yeah, Alex put together that report and all that stuff, but I don't want you solely drafting based on analytics. I don't want you to solely draft based on what a piece of paper or a computer tells me. I want guys to go in there with a football mind, a football background, to be able to look at these players, have a heart-to-heart with them, and know their guts, their character, their determination, what kind of person they are. So I think a piece of paper can only tell you so much. I don't want to rip it up and throw it in the garbage, but at the same time, I'm not evaluating or making my decisions solely based on analytics.
Yeah, and it seems that Jeffrey Lurie has almost felt like his word has more meaning or power because he has these analytics to back it up. Right?
Yeah. And that's certainly going to be problematic. If you're going to your head coach who has won you a story, what I thought was one of the most interesting little tidbits, that Green Bay Packers game, that Thursday night football game 2 years ago, right? It was in September. It was sort of a season-saving victory. They go to Green Bay, Lambeau Field, on 3 days rest, and they beat Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, and they do it by running the football. And Carson was efficient, no turnovers, but they ran the football down the Packers' throat, and that allowed them to win that game. To me, that's to be lauded. That's Doug Peterson deviating from the script. That's Doug Peterson finding a way to win a game, doing the Bill Belichick, whatever it takes to win this game. I'm not going to throw because that's what people want me to do, or that's what I've always done. I use the run to win this football game. And based on that report, when Jeffrey Lurie sits down with Doug Peterson and he questions, why didn't you throw the ball more? That to me is outrageous.
Preposterous. I mean, and then to even compound that is, okay, they're doing this every Tuesday. Hey, let's talk about this game. I mean, look, one of the things I like about my position and my job is I'm in charge and no one really asks, maybe, but the thing that really ticks you off is no one asked me a question for 3 months. It's that fourth week after the 3 months. It's like, no one talked to me for 3 months and now you want to ask me all these questions. I couldn't imagine getting it every single week like that.
And Mike, I talk to a lot of people as I cover the league, and I talk to a lot of people across the league and various front office executives and various coaches. And I wanted to know how unique of a situation, because going into the conversation, you think this is different, right? And to a man, I still haven't found another team or another coach that says, yeah, I sit down with my GM and my owner every Tuesday after a football game and go play by play and break it all down. I have not seen that. And again, you're talking about a guy in Doug Peterson who, after winning a Super Bowl, could have put his foot down and said, hey, I got the pedigree now. I'm the only guy in franchise history to hoist the Vince Lombardi. And now you're going to bring me in on Tuesday and question play by play. What was I thinking? What was I doing? That crosses the line. To me, that's very unique to the NFL.
Yeah, you mentioned you talked to people around the league. You just recently talked to Jacoby Brissett, who was the quarterback in Indianapolis with Nick Sirianni. I'm interested to get some of your takeaways from what Brissett had to say about playing for Sirianni. What stood out about a player talking about the new Eagles coach? Rob's frozen right now. He must be hitting a dry spot there on the Schuylkill up there. We'll try to get him back in and see if we can't get him unfrozen here and see. We'll try to get him back and going here on the Sports Bash, because one of the things we wanted to ask him about is that conversation. There he goes. All right. I think he's back. What were you on the Schuylkill up there?
Yeah, and actually, I'm on 295. I'm in South Jersey, man. I'm right in your listening audience, and I love it. So, Jacoby Brissett was really high on Nick Sirianni, Mike. Really, that Nick is a guy who's prepared for everything. That was one.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of a bad connection with Rob. Let's see if maybe we'll give him another minute or so. Oh, there you go. He just started to, yeah. So, yeah, we lost him there. There you go. All right, we lost you at the Brissett stuff, but you said that he was very impressed with him. So it looks like you got a nice, clear look again.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how much you heard there, Mike, and I apologize for that. Sorry. But what Jacoby said about Nick was he's prepared for everything. There's no situation that they can encounter that Nick Sirianni hasn't planned in his head or planned ahead of time. And the other part of it that I thought was great was he thinks that he's a great teacher, and he's somebody who can take information and break it down in a way that players are going to understand what he's trying to teach them. And that's going to be very important for a young football team and a young quarterback in Jalen Hurts.
All right, Rob Maadi, Associated Press, covers the Eagles. Check out his full interview with Jacoby Brissett at Rob Maadi. You can check out the highlights. I want to obviously, and we just lost him completely there. So we will. All right, well, good conversation with Rob on the organization and the draft and everything like that. And obviously, you know, the stuff at the beginning. I said this before. Like, I'm not trying to say discount. There's Rob. All right. So he just jumped back in the stream there. I wanted to get your thoughts then real quickly on this draft. I asked this question earlier. They moved from 6 to 12. There are people who don't like the trade, essentially because they don't like Roseman, I guess. I mean, he makes the trade, so therefore you can't endorse it. But if you did not like the trade and they landed this guy at 12, who would make you change your mind?
I love the trade, Mike, because I think this team isn't good enough to where one player at 6 is going to make an impact or a difference for them. And I think most people who didn't like it wanted a playmaker at 6, but this is a team that whenever they draft in the top half of the draft since 1988 when they took Keith Jackson, everybody else, the 13 players since then, have been quarterbacks, defensive linemen, or offensive linemen. So I feel this team is going to probably go with an O lineman or a defensive lineman, and I'm not necessarily convinced they're going to stay at 12, Mike. I think they could potentially trade even further down and add more picks. So I love accumulating draft picks. I like the aspect of building more pieces together, but the only problem is we still got the same front office making the draft picks, and they got to hit on them. They got to evaluate them properly. I would have no issue if they end up with Rashawn Slater. I do like going with somebody like Patrick Surtain if he gets by Dallas at 10. And I think I reported a couple of weeks ago that Dallas really is high on Kyle Pitts. They love him. They might trade up to get him. If Surtain was there, I'd be happy. If Rashawn Slater was there, I think that'd be a great move too for the Eagles. I don't know that I like any defensive lineman at 12, but if they were going to trade down and be in a later teens, add more draft assets and get a D lineman, that would work for me too.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you this question. Who in your mind gets credit or drafted Lane Johnson?
Oh man, right? Because that was Chip's first draft, but you got to also give it to Howie Roseman because he at the time was the GM. So if we're going to kill Howie for all the bad picks, we got to give him credit for Lane Johnson. In 2015,
Zach Ertz was also in that draft.
Yeah, and that's a tremendous draft. That was a tremendous draft for Howie, and to me, I'm giving him credit for it. During his tenure with Chip Kelly, we know 15 he stepped aside because Laurie made him step aside, and that one we'll give to Chip Kelly, and he's the one that ended up drafting Nelson Aguilar. But you got to give Howie credit for Lane Johnson and Zach Ertz. As much as we want to bash him for everything else, give him credit for those two.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because you said we don't trust this front office, and I'm trying to go back and say, okay, somebody had to be in charge of or gets credit for some of the good players on this team. I mean, Dallas Goedert's a nice player. Miles Sanders is a nice player. Lane Johnson's a good player. Zach Ertz is a good player. I mean, some of these guys, Fletcher Cox, who drafted him?
That's Andy. But Jordan Mailata, they steal in the 7th round, right? They take a gamble on him. And if he develops into a future starter, that's one that Howie can hang his hat on. Jalen Mills, getting him in the 7th round, starting cornerback for a Super Bowl champion. Give him credit for that.
Right. Sayamala's a starter, 3rd round, right?
Yeah.
So I get everybody's hate and their anger, but there aren't universal misses from this front office. I agree that the last couple of years, it seems like it's when it's really been a problem. And that is, it feels like, Rob, when we're starting to hear that Laurie has gotten more involved.
Yeah, and that could be a factor. And this is something that I've been wanting to take a deep dive into, Mike. And just the scheduling and everything else is very difficult. But I really want to take a deep dive into those draft picks most recently. I don't really think we can evaluate 2020 yet. 2020 to me is still up in the air. Jalen Reagor could develop into being somebody who's a viable number 1 wide receiver. He's not there yet, but he could certainly develop into that. So it's something that we got to look into, I feel, and see what who was responsible. And you know what we do here in Philly, man, is we're going to look at all the guys, and I'm guilty of this all the time. They passed on DK Metcalf. They passed on Justin Jefferson. Well, look at those teams who drafted those guys, and then look at the other misses they've had in other areas, and maybe their other 1st-round pick or a 3rd-round pick or historically. It's something that we really, we're gonna focus only on the Eagles because we're in Philly, but other teams have possible misses too.
By the way, DK Metcalf got passed by everybody, not once, but twice. So he had major medical red flags. I mean, I get it. It's frustrating, but it's not like this guy was sitting there at 10 and you had 9 and didn't take him. You didn't take him in the 2nd round when everybody else passed on him too.
Mike, somehow you have turned me into a Howie Roseman apologist on the show today. That is good work out of you.
Hey, I just try to play, but I just want everybody to see that I feel like he's not the best. He's not the worst. He's somewhere probably in the middle. That's all.
He's a Super Bowl champion general manager. There are certainly things that he does very well at his job. And one of those things is self-preservation, being able to develop the relationship that he has with Jeffrey Lurie to enable him to be able to still be the GM despite some very lean years.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you got to give him credit for some of the things he's accomplished, but also look at it objectively and say there are areas to which I think Howie Roseman can improve.
No doubt.
Everybody can improve in every aspect of a football team.
No doubt. Look, if they won the Super Bowl every year, different story. They don't. They've come on up. But I say this, they have back-to-back losing seasons one time in the Lurie era. That's it. It's not a lot of franchises that can say that. They went 7-9 and 7-9, and everything else has been either a winning season or one losing season. So next year will be a winning season again.
Now you're pushing.
I thought I could get you on board with that.
Nah, I'm going to stop there. You got me to make excuses for Howie. You got me to say Jeffrey Lurie is one of the top owners in sports. I'm going to draw the line at the Eagles to be a winning team next year.
Rob Maadi, the Associated Press, of course. Check out his interview with Jacoby Brissett. He talks a lot about Nick Sirianni. The draft is coming up. We'll talk to Rob, and he, like all guys, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Rob, take care, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, Mike.
Yeah, man. Rob Maadi, at Rob Maadi on Twitter. Follow him there. Look, I want to, and we'll bring this up on the other side. We'll kind of finish up with one more segment on this conversation. This story about the dysfunction and everybody on Twitter just going crazy about this dysfunction in the Eagles front office. And I agree. I think there is a semblance of dysfunction there, but I think it's something that happens everywhere in the NFL, in baseball, in basketball, probably hockey too. Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN, brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan, open, Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot, online, mattblattnissan.com. So I want to get more into that dysfunction article coming up next, because some of the stuff that Rob mentioned, he said, you're selling me on this. I'm not trying to sell you. I'm just saying. I had this conversation on Sunday, which was, I'm not for or against. I'm just taking all the information and presenting. You can do what you want with it. Like Rob said, you're making me open my eyes a little bit. You know, there are things out there that I feel like we just don't want to accumulate all the facts. We don't want to accumulate things that distort our narratives, so we don't include them when we make our decisions. Yeah, the narrative, the stuff that gets in the way of supporting your narrative, that happens a lot. Believe it or not, people don't like when actual facts get in the way of your narratives. And I just like to present them. You can think what you want afterward. Because quite frankly, I said, I don't think Roseman's great. I don't think he's the worst. I think he's just, I don't know. You want me to give you a number? He's the 12th. He's the 12th best. Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN. Free mobile app. All right, Sports Best Live 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. We got plenty this week still to go. Tomorrow's show, very busy. Sal Powell, Adam Kaplan, Paul Hudrick, Bob Wankel. It's a Friday show. By the way, happy hour Friday tomorrow, PT. We'll have fun there. Want to tell you about my friends over at Trifecta Therapeutics. So I started baseball season. We had practice last night. My elbow hurts. My back hurts. My hands are killing me. I hit about 975 ground balls. And I was in midseason form, by the way, hitting them rockets. Anybody who's ever played for me, those rockets were coming. Yeah, I was hitting them last night. First time out, but I'm dying today. You got that pain? Yeah. If it doesn't go away, you know where to go. Trifecta Therapeutics. South Jersey, right in Glassboro. They do it all. They have great doctors there, and they offer cutting-edge equipment, treatment plans, and methods to get you feeling better, playing better, and staying better. It's one thing to be like, it doesn't hurt today, but now it's back. They help the pros and the Joes, so stop settling for less. Get with the best. Trifecta. Schedule your free discovery session today. Look, if you got that knee or that ankle, mine's the elbow. That elbow, it's just right in this spot. I can feel it. Use code ESPN Radio at trifectatherapeutics.com to get your discovery session today. Hey, Doc, what's going on in my elbow here? Can you just kind of tell me about this? And they'll take a look at it for you. All right. I feel that this article about the dysfunction is just like putting blood in the water, right? It's just like you're just putting the churn out there, the chum, boom, there you go, shark, yeah, get some blood in the water. Let's put it out there. I mean, the social media warriors are going nuts. And it's dysfunction. The Eagles have all this dysfunction. And I'm thinking to myself, there's validity to this. There's validity to, the Eagles have dysfunction. I think, and the first thing I said, and I know I talk about this a lot, but I was reading that and I'm thinking to myself, doesn't everybody have some level of dysfunction? I think that's sports nowadays. Teams need to make the decision one way or the other. What are you? The Tampa Bay Rays, they're an analytics department. That's who they are. So their analytics side of the building gets the say. This is who we are. This is what we're doing. This is how it's going to be. That's why they are successful. They are an analytic-driven organization, and that's the tone. The Eagles, much like a lot of teams, they can't find the balance, right? They don't know if they want to be a football guy or if they want to be an analytical team. They're trying to serve both masters. And when you try to serve both masters, you're going to have problems. And you have the scouts telling you this is what we should do. And you have the analytic department saying this is what we should do. And the owner says, I want to listen to this guy. And you have the scouts. You ever watch Moneyball? That's what happened. The analytic department essentially told the scouts to pound sand. Billy Beane went in and the scout said, blah, blah, I'm going to do this. And Billy Beane fired him. You're done. So this has gone on. The Eagles, remember in 2015? Oh, man, the Eagles are dysfunction in an organization. Look at the dysfunction they have going on in there. Chip Kelly, dysfunction. They're a disaster. They're a mess. They won the Super Bowl 2 years later. These things ebb and flow. You have winning seasons. No one complains. You have losing seasons. Stuff starts to come out. You win. It goes away. Doesn't mean it goes away. It just, you win. Everybody has dysfunction. Name me a business that, where do you work? where do you work has dysfunction. I know where I work has dysfunction. Not everybody gets along. Not everybody agrees. Not everybody's on the same page. Not everybody has the same philosophies. But that doesn't mean you can't put out a good product. I'm sure in 2017, there was dysfunctional things that happened inside the Eagles front office. Didn't preclude them from winning the Super Bowl. Jeff Lurie didn't like the way that the Eagles won a game. That's dysfunctional. It didn't preclude them from winning the game. They won the game. They went to the playoffs that year, by the way, and yet you had dysfunction going on. I feel like the word dysfunction makes us feel like you're at the point of no return, right? Like you have hit the absolute abyss and you cannot come out of it. That's asinine. This team has had dysfunction. Many teams have had dysfunction. You know what's real dysfunction? The Washington football team for 30 years. The Cincinnati Bengals for most of their existence. That's dysfunction. The Detroit Lions entire franchise. That's dysfunction. We're talking about a team that hardly has a losing season. When the Eagles have a losing season, it makes news. When the Eagles don't win double-digit games, we feel is dysfunction. Think about the dysfunction that these franchises have. And as Rob said, I want to go, this is what he was saying, I want to go and look at the problems and the things that other things said, that other teams do. This is interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong. I listened to the entire Maadi interview. He never said you opened his eyes, Mike. He said you made him sound like a Howie apologist. I don't remember either one of those things. He said you're now making me become a Howie apologist. We could play it over again. I don't care. If you have that bite from Maadi, if you can get that for me, Josh. He's not listening to me. You listening to me? Over there? I don't care whether he thinks that or not. He said you opened his eyes. I don't know. Maybe he did. I don't know. I think that that's besides the point. But that's normal. Dysfunction in sports organizations is normal. There are a ton of people that are in a very competitive business. You have scouts and these analytics people. They both think they're right. They both think that they have the information that the team. What did Louis Riddick say today? Louis Riddick said about the whole story regarding drafting Sean Taylor. About, do you have the bite from Maadi? Were you listening to me? No, when Maadi said something about, it was towards the end, I guess, when he said something about that I'm making him sound like a Howie apologist or something to that effect. Yeah. The gentleman, or I say that, I'm being nice. I say he's a gentleman. I don't know. He said, correct me if I'm wrong. I listened to the entire Maadi interview. He never said you opened his eyes, Mike. Maybe he did. I didn't say that he said he's opened his eyes. He said something to the effect about making him sound like a Howie apologist. I don't remember the exact quote. He said what he said, but whatever. We'll play it. But that being said, like the fact of this, he mentioned the Sean Taylor situation, and he said there was 10 people in the room, and they were all like at the top of their lungs screaming about this. And that they were all just, fighting for who they wanted. Kellen Winslow was on the board, and people wanted Kellen Winslow. They thought he was the perfect tight end for Joe Gibbs' system. And that Sean Taylor, that Louis Riddick basically stood up there and let it all out. Like, this guy's the guy we need to take. And they have a board that had 100 people on it. And the day that they had this argument, Kellen Winslow was at the top of that board. And that the next day, Sean Taylor was on the top of that board. But the point that Riddick brought up today that I found, and we talked about this during Football at 4, was that 2 weeks to go, you don't know who you're taking. And he said this year, more so than any year, that the information coming in is so much later because of all that's going on. So these guys are getting new information yesterday. You might have saw Justin Fields for the first time yesterday, or talked to him for the first time yesterday if you're San Francisco. So I think there's a lot of these organizations that have difference of opinions. I don't know that makes you dysfunctional. I think that makes you normal. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. The free mobile app. Don't forget, I got a Sports Bash cash code word coming up at 55 after the hour. Sports Bash is brought to you by Maplat Nissan. The all-new Maplat Nissan open Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot. Online at maplatnissan.com. All right, when we come back, we got the sounds of the day. We'll play that Rob Maadi sound just to see what he had to say. Coming up tomorrow, Sal Powell, Adam Kaplan, Paul Hudrick, Bob Wankel. Good show tomorrow. Good show today. We'll wrap it up. Coming up next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Go to 97.3 ESPN. All right, can you dig that? So we did get the audio from Rob Maadi, the gentleman who texted in. He says, correct me if I'm wrong, I listened to the entire Maadi interview. He said, you made him sound like a Howie apologist. That is not what he said. He said this, actually.
Mike, somehow you have turned me into a Howie Roseman apologist on the show today. That is good work out of you.
Yeah, I thought I heard it right. I didn't remember, but I could have been wrong. But that was what Rob said. He said, Mike, you have somehow turned me into a Howie Roseman apologist. Your thoughts?
He also said it was good work out of you.
He said it was good work out of me.
So technically, it was actually a compliment. It wasn't a backhanded thing.
Yeah, I don't know what the text message was. People hear what they want to hear all the time. They're typically not right, but we had the audio. Now, it's funny what the person says. I listened to the whole thing, and he said, it's funny that they say they listened to it and heard it and are so wrong, but they thought enough to say, I'm right, that I'm going to text you, even though they were wrong.
My two takeaways from that is, number one, if the person listened to the whole interview and that's what they took away from it, I feel sorry for them.
Well, the
number
point
two,
is they were trying to say that I misquoted Rob because I wanted myself to sound like he agreed with me.
But if that's the thing that was most important to you, then I feel sorry for you.
I mean, look, I appreciate listening. I appreciate the engagement and the interaction. I don't understand some of the venom and hate in some of the text messages, specifically from that gentleman. I mean, I think, you don't have to be so angry with life, man. I mean, we're all having fun here. Rob agreed with me. I'm sorry that you were mad that he agreed with me. Like, he didn't even agree with me. He just said that I was forcing him to have, like, he was looking at it in a different way.
Listen, that guy's just upset that Rob Maadi said that you're doing a good job, Mike, and that guy listening isn't doing a good job.
I don't know.
You have the Rob Maadi seal of approval, and that guy is probably doing a job.
Rob, by the way, is a very nice human being. That's, if I can get his seal of approval, I'm doing something right.
You are doing something right.
All right.
What do I know?
What else do we got here?
Now that we got that out of the way.
Well, I was looking, I said, okay, maybe I made a mistake. It happens from time to time. You talk for 4 hours, you don't remember and say everything 1,000% correct. So if I was wrong and he called me out on it, I wanted to make sure I listened to the audio and I didn't want to misquote somebody. That would not be true. That would be not good. So I wanted to that's why I said, make sure you get the audio. I wanted to hear the audio because my intention is not to misquote someone to make myself sound better. If he said something that disagreed with me, I don't care. We have a good relationship, Rob and I, that we can disagree. I was surprised that he said that some of the things I told him was making him look at him in a different. I don't know that he's actually being serious, by the way. All right, what I do know is this. He said this about Jeff Lurie.
I always thought of Jeffrey Lurie, Mike, as a guy who wanted to win, was passionate about winning, who didn't have a problem with spending money, somebody who would go out there at all costs and try and bring in the talent. I lived through, as a fan, the Norman Brayman era, and I saw free agents walk out the door. I saw Reggie White leave. I saw other guys leave. So Jeffrey Lurie's the complete opposite. We know he wants to win. We know he wants to bring in talent.
We know that. But are we beginning to think differently? Like, I never thought Jeff Lurie's a problem. And I don't know that he's still is he fixable? Can he change? Has he changed? Did he just become a problem? This whole thing fascinates me.
I think it gets back to something I can't remember if it was Moshe or Kaplan, but one of them on Football at 4 mentioned to you a few weeks ago. They said that they think that when Andy Reid was gone and the Chip Kelly era happened, that era changed how Jeffrey Lurie views his football team, and that he thought it was important for him now to be more involved.
I don't know.
And that the Super Bowl emboldened him to do more.
What about this is the way I kind of look at it, is the Eagles won that Super Bowl. Lurie, that's all he wanted. He wanted that Super Bowl. He got it, and now he wants another one so bad that he's almost going too far to try to get
micromanaging.
He's going too far to try to get another one.
He's micromanaging. That's
like
the word you're looking for.
A buddy of mine, he messaged me. He's a Cowboys fan. And I guess he must be listening. And I said, so I don't know what made him say this, but he said the Cowboys hold the most record for winning seasons in a row. And I said, yeah, when was that? The 70s. And he said the 60s to the 80s. I said, well, I was 5. And then, of course, his response is they got 5 rings. And I said, the stuff in the past doesn't do much for me. The Eagles won a Super Bowl 3 years ago, and I already don't care. Do you think I care about a Super Bowl if the Eagles won it in 1980? I could care less. They won one 3 years ago, and people don't care already. I don't care that the Eagles won the Super Bowl. So I don't live on those things. Like, however many Super Bowls any team has is great. That's great for you. Whatever you want to do with them is fantastic. The Eagles recently won a Super Bowl, more recently than any team in the NFC East. And now people think they're dysfunctional. So whatever they did more recently than any other team in this division doesn't matter anymore. To me, I don't like the Eagles could have won 10 Super Bowls and I don't care. The Phillies won the World Series in 2008. How long did it take before that was out of your sight and out of your mind? It's way out of sight and mind for me, right?
I always tell people when people start bringing up total rings, I always say, listen, there's 2 eras of the NFL. There is the BSC era and there's the ASC era. There's before salary cap and after salary cap. Before free agency, after free agency. To me, anything that happened before like 92 and 93 is a totally different era of football when it comes to comparison. So if you want to live in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, good for you. But when it comes to modern day football, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to draft fill in the blank guy or trade for fill in the blank guy because so-and-so did it or did something like it in 1978.
All right, Rob Maadi, good, well put, by the way. Maadi said this about the power struggle between the football guy and the analytics department.
This power struggle.
I'm having a power struggle with this
Technology?
player. Yeah. We've been having this power struggle. You know why? Because he agrees with me. That's why. Can't have him agree with me. Let's see if I can.
This power struggle has developed, and Alex Hallaby and the analytics department, those are things that we certainly got to keep an eye on and we got to dig into. And I'm with you as far as how much does an analytical guy have power in an organization? Because I don't think information's a bad thing. Like, there are people, right, who'll sit back and tell you analytics is terrible, it's ruined the game, it's this and that. I think you need as much information as you can get. If it gives you any kind of edge, yeah, Alex put together that report and all that stuff, but I don't want you solely drafting based on analytics.
And you know what? I would almost suggest that having too much information is information overload sometimes. Just do it the old-fashioned way. Get the – I mean, I get it. You have information, you're going to use it. But I would almost feel like sports would be so much better without them.
Paralysis by overanalysis.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Rob that the information, you want the information if you can get it. But I almost feel like we'd all be better off without it. Seriously. But that's evolution. Like, you evolve because you get more info and things change. We like things the way they used to be. But they change because we get more information. Many of us are okay with not having the information and just playing it the way that it used to be. What did Triple H say? Evolve or die.
King of Kings? What?
Yeah. Game night's up next. Josh Thompson, PFL, coming back to AC. Kevin Durso, Flyers, Caps tonight. That's coming up next.